What if the most attractive thing about you had nothing to do with your face, your body, or the story you tell the world, but with how quietly you carry your mind through chaos? You have seen this kind of person. They do not chase attention. They do not shout their worth. They do not decorate every silence with words. Yet when they walk into a room, something in the air changes. People lower their voices, shoulders relax, the noise softens around them as if the world itself is taking a breath. They are not dazzling in the usual way, not always the most beautiful, the most charismatic, or the loudest. Their power is quieter, heavier. You feel safer when they are near. You feel less frantic, less scattered, less lost. It is as if their very presence reminds you of who you could be if you finally stopped running from yourself. From a Stoic perspective, this is not an accident. It is not magic. It is not a trick. It is the natural radiation of an ordered inner life. The ancient Stoics would call it strength of soul, the alignment of your thoughts, your actions, and your values. Not a performance, but a posture. Invisible to the eye, unmistakable to the nervous system. In a world obsessed with being seen, Stoic philosophy quietly suggests that your real power comes from how you see. In a culture desperate to be heard, the Stoics point you back to how you listen. Modern life screams that you must impress. The Stoic answer is unsentimental. Do not strive to impress. Strive to be solid. Marcus Aurelius reflected that true beauty in a person lives in the steadiness of their mind. Epictetus reminded his students that the only thing that truly belongs to them is their power of judgment, the way they choose to interpret and respond to what happens. Seneca wrote again and again that character, not circumstance, is what makes a life admirable. So when you feel that strange, calming pull from someone who barely says a word, you are not witnessing a social trick. You are seeing the quiet force of an organized inner world pressing outward. You can chase charm, you can chase aesthetic perfection, you can chase status. But if inside you are restless, frantic, and easily shaken, your presence will always tremble. People may be entertained by you, they may be impressed, but deep down they will not feel anchored near you. Stoic philosophy often teaches that humans are drawn not to glitter, but to gravity, to those who have learned, slowly and painfully, to rule themselves. This is why beauty fades, and yet some people grow more compelling with age. Lines on the face deepen, hair thins, the body changes, but their presence sharpens. Their eyes become clearer, less reactive, more honest. They have buried illusions and outlived many false selves. What remains is dense, heavy with experience, light with acceptance. That is the kind of magnetism the Stoics would call worth pursuing, not the kind that screams, "Look at me," the kind that whispers, "You can rest here," the kind that does not pull your attention outward into noise, but inward toward clarity. You may think this is reserved for the rare few, the gifted, the lucky, the naturally calm. Stoic thinkers firmly disagree. They would tell you that what you admire in those people is not an accident of birth, but the result of habits, choices, repeated acts of inner discipline that anyone can train slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. You cannot control how the world sees you. You cannot control every judgment, every opinion, every whisper. The Stoics would say that this is outside your power. But you can shape the way you meet the world. You can choose what you practice in the small, unremarkable moments. And over time, that practice becomes the atmosphere you carry. From a Stoic perspective, attraction is not about convincing others that you are valuable. It is about living in such a way that you no longer need their verdict. You stop performing and start being. You stop clinging to the surface and begin to inhabit your own depth. People feel that difference. They may not know how to explain it. They may simply say there is something about you, but what they are sensing is this. You are not frantic. You are not chasing. You are not replacing inner emptiness with outer noise. You are standing where you are, fully, quietly, and it calms them. This is why, as strange as it sounds, the less desperate you are to be perceived as attractive, the more attractive you can become. The less you need people to like you, the more clearly they can see you. The more you focus on governing your own mind, the less you are governed by their opinions. Stoicism does not offer you a trick for instant charm. It offers you a way of living that may, as a side effect, make you deeply magnetic, not through seduction but through stability, not through manipulation but through integrity. And that way of living begins, not with how you present yourself, but with how you pay attention. In a noisy age, the rarest habit is not speaking, it is listening. Think about how most conversations unfold. A person begins to speak, and before they have even finished their second sentence, the other mind is elsewhere, preparing an answer, collecting counter-arguments, hunting for a chance to bring the focus back to itself, waiting for a pause not to understand, but to take back the spotlight. This is normal. This is what the untrained mind does, but it is also why so many people feel lonely even when surrounded by others. But they do not feel heard. They are seen but not understood. There is noise but no real contact. From a Stoic perspective, to truly listen is an act of discipline. It requires you to restrain your ego, your hunger to be noticed, your impulse to react. It demands stillness. Epictetus is often remembered as saying that nature gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we might listen more than we speak. Behind the simplicity of that reminder is a hard practice. It means accepting that at this moment, what is happening in the other person may be more important than your need to be impressive. Imagine sitting with someone who actually does this. They are not fidgeting with their phone. They are not scanning the room for someone more interesting. They are not listening only until they can steer the conversation back to themselves. Their attention rests on you like a steady light. They do not rescue you with quick advice. They do not rush to fix your feelings. They let you finish your thought. They let your pauses exist. When you speak, their eyes stay on your face, not on the clock. Under that kind of attention, your defenses soften almost without your consent. You find yourself saying things you did not plan to reveal. You feel strangely lighter, not because they solved your problems, but because you finally felt allowed to be honest. This is the quiet power of a listener who has learned self-control. From a Stoic point of view, their silence is not empty, it is active. They are holding back their impulse to judge, to correct, to dominate. They allow your words to arrive without immediately coating them in their own assumptions. They are not proving anything, they are simply present. That presence is magnetic. Many people try to impress others by speaking well. Fewer realize that you can impress without a single clever line by listening deeply. People may forget your stories, your jokes, your opinions. They rarely forget how they felt in your presence when they were vulnerable. To listen as the Stoics might advise, you begin with restraint. You enter a conversation aware of the temptation to interrupt, to dramatize, to show off. You watch that urge rise in you, but you do not obey it. You let it pass while you keep your attention anchored in the other person. You study not just their words but their tone, their pauses, where their eyes go, what their hands are doing. You listen beneath the surface. You ask yourself silently, what is this person really trying to say? What are they afraid of? What are they hoping I will understand? You do not need to say any of this aloud. You do not need to make a speech about your empathy. The depth of your listening will speak for you. From a Stoic perspective, this kind of listening is not weakness. It is strength turned inward. It is your ego obeying your reason. The part of you that wants attention stands aside so that the part of you that wants truth can step forward. The irony is that when you stop grasping for attention in conversation, your presence begins to stand out. When you do not rush to share your every thought, the thoughts you finally do share carry more weight. When you are not constantly trying to be interesting, you become deeply interested, and that is far more powerful. Stoicism often teaches that your primary work is on your own judgments. Listening is where this work is tested, because to truly hear another person, you must lay down, even for a moment, your harsh narratives about them, about yourself, about how everything relates to your insecurities. You watch your mind try to categorize them, to compare yourself to them, to defend against them, and gently, firmly you say no, not now, now I am here, now I am listening. This same discipline can be turned inward. If you want to become a person whose presence calms others, you must first learn to become a person whose presence can calm yourself. That means listening not only to the world, but to the noise within you. Sit alone for a short while with no entertainment, no distraction, no attempt to be productive. Simply sit. Watch what your mind does. It runs toward old arguments. It dredges up regrets. It rehearses fantasy conversations where you finally win, finally impress, finally prove them wrong. It jumps endlessly from fear to desire to memory. Most people live their entire lives without ever really observing this storm, shaped by it, exhausted by it, but rarely do they take the position of the watcher. From a Stoic point of view, that shift is everything. When you watch your thoughts without immediately acting on them, you discover something crucial. You are not your first reaction. You are not your urge to defend yourself. You are not your craving for attention. You are the one who sees it all. Listen to the way you speak to yourself throughout a day. Notice the tone. Is it harsh, impatient, always reminding you of your inferiority, your failures, your flaws? Does it constantly compare you to others? Does it treat you as an enemy to be controlled, rather than as a human to be guided? Stoic philosophy suggests that inner speech shapes your life as much as outer speech. If you constantly attack yourself in your own mind, you will move through the world tense, ashamed, defensive. No matter how carefully you adjust your appearance, that tension will leak out. But if you begin to listen and then gently correct that inner voice, not with shallow affirmations, but with reason, patience, and honesty, something inside you starts to unclench. You notice the thought, "I am nothing compared to them," and you answer with quiet clarity. That judgment is unnecessary. I am a work in progress like every other human being. My task is not to be them. My task is to be a little wiser than I was yesterday. You hear the thought, "They must think I am ridiculous," and you respond, "Their opinion is not within my control. My job is to act with integrity, not to read their minds." Again and again, you meet self-attack with calm reflection, not sugary positivity, not denial, just sanity. Over time, S becomes a habit. Your inner climate becomes less violent, less erratic, and as within, so without. People feel when you are at war with yourself. They may not know the details, but they sense the defensiveness, the reactivity, the constant need for reassurance. They also feel when you have started to make peace with yourself through honest listening and rational correction. That peace does not make you passive, it makes you grounded. From a Stoic perspective, to be magnetic is not to draw everyone in, but to draw in the right kind of attention. The attention of those who are ready to breathe a little deeper, to speak a little more honestly, to step a little closer to their own truth. Deep listening, outward and inward, is the first habit that begins to change the entire atmosphere around you. It requires patience, humility, and discipline. But as you practice it, people will start to experience something rare when they are near you. They will feel less alone inside their own minds. And when people feel less alone around you, they remember you. This is only the beginning. Listening is the first step, the first clearing of space. Once you learn to be present enough to truly hear, the next habit of a quietly magnetic life becomes possible, one that the Stoics held as a central pillar of strength, the cultivation of inner peace in a world that constantly tries to fracture your attention and provoke your emotions. Inner peace, from a Stoic perspective, is not a reward the world gives you when it finally stops disturbing you. It is the stance you take toward a world that will never stop disturbing you. The noise outside will continue. Messages, opinions, demands, invitations to panic. People will act unjustly. Plans will fall apart. Your body will age. Your fortunes will rise and fall, and the future will remain what it has always been, uncertain. If you wait for life to settle before you decide to be calm, you will wait your whole life. The Stoics understood this clearly. They lived under emperors, in empires, amid wars, plagues, betrayals, and the constant possibility of exile or death. Yet they spoke again and again of tranquility, of a still mind, of a quiet center. They did not imagine peace as a warm bath where nothing difficult ever touches you. They saw it more like a well-built ship moving through violent seas. The water strikes it, the waves rise and fall, the wind screams across the deck, but the structure holds. It may creak, it may take on water, but it does not surrender its direction. Inner peace is not an escape from impact, it is the capacity to remain your own, even while the world collides with you. From a Stoic point of view, what breaks most people is not what happens, but the story they attach to it. An event occurs, someone speaks sharply, you lose an opportunity, a plan collapses. In itself, this is raw fact. But the mind rarely leaves it at that. Without training, the mind adds judgments. This is unbearable. This always happens to me. This proves I am worthless. This means everything is ruined. And those judgments, repeated often enough, do more damage than the original blow. Epictetus taught that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we form about them. You can see this clearly if you compare two people in the same circumstance. One loses a job and immediately decides they have been destroyed, that life has singled them out for cruelty. Another loses a job and, after the shock, quietly asks, "What can I learn here? What can I build from this?" The external event is similar, the inner event is completely different. The second person is not immune to fear or pain. They feel it, but they do not merge with it. They do not let the feeling become their entire identity. They maintain a small, calm place inside from which they can think, choose, and act. That small place is what the Stoics trained. Imagine your mind as a pool of water. When it is calm, you can see all the way to the bottom. Shapes are clear. You can tell which movements are fish gliding through, which are leaves settling, which are reflections from the sky. When the water is violently stirred, everything blurs. You cannot distinguish one thing from another. You reach out and grab at shadows. When your mind is stirred by constant reactivity, you lose sight of what actually matters. You become easy to provoke, easy to manipulate, easy to exhaust. Every irritation becomes a crisis. Every delay becomes an insult. Every challenge becomes a personal attack. From a Stoic perspective, such a mind cannot lead itself, let alone inspire others. The second habit that makes a person quietly magnetic is therefore this commitment to cultivate inner calm, not as a show, not as a mask, but as a practiced way of meeting each day. Modern life, designed to keep you stimulated, does not support this easily. Notifications light up your screen, fragmenting your focus. News feeds are constructed to provoke anger, fear, envy. Advertisements whisper constantly that you are lacking, incomplete, behind. Middle of this, your nervous system is always slightly aroused, always ready to react. If you do nothing, your inner state will be shaped by this environment. Restlessness will become your default. Stillness will feel foreign, even threatening, because you are so accustomed to noise. This is why the Stoic ideal of peace can feel almost rebellious now. To pull your attention inward, to quiet your reactions, to step away from the constant tug of stimulation is to reject the role the world has written for you, the role of permanent consumer, permanent reactor. Marcus Aurelius reflected that the soul finds its rest by returning to itself, by aligning with reason and with what is within its control. In practice, this looks less mystical than it sounds. Something challenges you. A person criticizes you. A plan fails. Traffic traps you. Technology breaks. Your untrained instinct is to react instantly, curse, complain, blame, spiral. The Stoic habit invites you to do something different, something deceptively simple. Ask yourself in plain language what in this situation is actually mine to control and what is not. You cannot control the other person's temperament. You cannot control the past. You cannot control the weather, the delay, the failure that has already occurred. You can control your response. You can choose whether to add more chaos or bring in clarity. If it is within your influence from a Stoic perspective, you take responsible, measured action. If it is not, you practice releasing your grip on it. Not because you do not care, but because clinging to the uncontrollable tears your mind into pieces and leaves you weaker for the parts of life where your effort truly matters. Peace, in this sense, is not passive acceptance. It is targeted effort. You spend your limited energy where it can actually shape reality, and you refuse to waste it on fantasies of control. This alone, when applied consistently, changes the entire texture of your days. To those around you, a person who lives this way feels different. While others explode over small setbacks, you remain composed. While group conversations escalate into loud arguments over every piece of news, you may ask a few precise questions or choose not to be drawn into outrage that leads nowhere. While others search frantically for someone to blame for every inconvenience, you look quietly for what can be done next. This does not mean you become detached, uncaring, or emotionally flat. Stoicism is not numbness. You can feel deeply and still be calm. You can ache and still act with reason. The point is not to stop feeling. The point is to stop being led by every feeling as if it were a command. People are drawn to that combination, feeling and steadiness held together. Think about the person you would want near you in a crisis. Not an entertainer, not someone who will scream with you, not someone who will collapse faster than you do. You look for the one whose presence tells you, without many words, we will face this, we will think clearly, we will not fall apart before it is necessary. When you cultivate inner peace through the Stoic training of your judgments, you begin to become that person, not just for others, but for yourself. There is a reason why those with genuine inner calm feel like shelter. In a storm, you instinctively move toward solid structures, not toward things that are already blowing away. Likewise, in emotional storms, people move toward those who do not immediately mirror their panic. From a Stoic perspective, this kind of peace has nothing to do with pretending. It is not a smile pasted over suppressed rage. It is not a soft tone hiding a mind that is secretly seething. That kind of false calm eventually reveals itself in sarcasm, passive aggression, or sudden eruptions. Real peace is quieter. It comes from hundreds of small private choices. Choosing not to check the same upsetting news headline for the 10th time today, choosing not to replay an old insult in your mind all evening, choosing to go for a walk instead of diving into pointless arguments online, choosing to sleep rather than chase another hour of distraction, knowing that an exhausted mind is easier to disturb. None of these choices looks dramatic. No one may praise you for them, but each one reinforces a particular message within you. My inner state matters. I am not helpless before my impulses. I can direct my attention. Over weeks and months, these messages sink in. Your nervous system begins to trust that you will not constantly throw it into fires it does not need to be in. You become less impulsive with your anger, less desperate with your desires. This does not happen overnight. It happens one decision at a time. The Stoics sometimes describe the ideal inner state as a fortress, not in the sense of a cold, isolated structure, but as a place that is hard to invade. Insults cannot easily breach its walls. Sudden praise does not knock it over with pride. Crises may reach its gates, but they do not immediately conquer the whole city. You build this fortress through practice. You notice when you're about to be pulled into outrage over something far from your reach. You catch yourself as you obsess over how someone might be judging you, and you ask instead, am I acting according to my values? You hear the rising inner monologue of complaint and decide, not this time. This time I will accept what I cannot change and put my effort where it counts. Such habits create a presence that others can feel, a person who is not easily baited into arguments, who can absorb frustration without exploding, who remains fair even when they have been wronged, emits a particular kind of energy, calm but not weak, kind but not naive, firm but not cruel. Standing next to them, other people often feel safer to be themselves. They feel less pressure to perform. They sense that this is someone who will not magnify their panic, someone who can listen to their fear without getting lost in it. That sense of safety is profoundly attractive. You may not look like the person the world advertises as desirable. Your features may not match whatever image is currently celebrated. Your clothes may be simple, your style unremarkable, yet if you carry this inner quiet, people will remember you more vividly than those who fit every external standard. Yet, are in constant inner turmoil. From a Stoic perspective, this is the only kind of attraction that truly lasts. The styles that impressed people at 20 look ridiculous at 40, but the felt experience of being in the presence of a stable, peaceful mind does not go out of fashion. To move toward this state, you might begin with small rituals of stillness. A few minutes in the morning without your phone, sitting with your own breathing, a deliberate pause before answering messages that provoke you, a habit of asking, whenever strong emotion arises, what is in my power here and what is not. These are not miracles. They will not remove all tension from your life, but they gradually change your relationship with tension. You no longer assume that every surge of anger must end in a reaction, that every spike of anxiety must dictate your choice. You learn that feelings can pass through you like waves, while the deeper part of you remains untouched. That deeper part is what the Stoics tried to live from. That deeper part is what people sense, even if they cannot name it. When they say of someone they are different, there is a steadiness in them. Inner peace, then, is not a private luxury. It becomes a public service, a gift you give to every room you walk into. You lower the temperature. You break the chain of reactivity. You show, simply by existing the way you do, that it is possible to live in this chaotic age without becoming entirely chaotic inside. Once you begin to taste this calm, another truth becomes clear. The value of your words changes, because if your mind is constantly disturbed, your speech will reflect that chaos. You will pour out unfiltered emotions in every direction, speak without thinking, harm carelessly, promise recklessly, flatter insincerely, and argue simply to affirm your ego. When you have trained yourself to be still inside, you see speech differently. You begin to understand why Stoic thinkers were wary of constant talking. They knew that words, once released, cannot be taken back. They leave marks in other people's minds. They can heal or they can injure. They can bring clarity or confusion. The third habit that makes a person deeply magnetic, therefore, is to treat speech as something sacred, to speak with purpose instead of spilling whatever the moment hands you. Think of the contrast you have experienced in your own life. Some people speak constantly, filling every silence with anecdotes, complaints, opinions. The more they talk, the less any one sentence matters. Their words slide off you like water off glass. You nod, you respond, but nothing stays with you after they leave. Then there are others who may say very little, but when they do speak, you find yourself quieting. Their voice is not necessarily loud. It may even be soft. The power lies not in volume, but in the fact that you can feel they have considered what they are saying. They are not using speech as decoration, they are using it as a tool. From a Stoic perspective, this difference begins long before the words reach the air. It begins in the choice to value silence. Silence is uncomfortable for many people because in silence you have to sit with yourself. Jokes cannot distract you. Opinions cannot shield you. Without constant talking, your insecurities feel more exposed. So you speak to drown out the discomfort. The Stoic path suggests another way. Learn to bear the discomfort of silence. Learn to stand in a room without reaching for words just to prove that you belong there. Let spaces exist between sentences. Let other people finish their thoughts fully before you respond. Let the conversation breathe. When you do this, you discover that most of what you thought you had to say was not necessary. The joke you were going to make was not needed. The defensive comment you were about to throw in was pure reflex. The story you wanted to share about yourself was more about craving validation than about truly serving the moment. As you restrain yourself, you begin to notice the power of restraint. The fewer words you use, the more each word matters. People notice when you decide to contribute, because you are not competing for attention every second. You have demonstrated through your listening and your stillness that when you speak, it is for a reason. From a Stoic point of view, speech should serve truth and usefulness. Before saying something, you might ask yourself quietly, is this true? Is this necessary? Is this kind? Not kind in the sense of avoiding all discomfort, but kind in the sense of aiming at the other person's good, not just at your ego's relief. This does not mean you shrink away from hard conversations. It means you do not enter them recklessly. You choose your moments. You are willing to say what needs to be said, but you do not spill your frustration everywhere just because you are feeling it. Think of how this affects your presence. A person who speaks rarely but honestly, whose words align with their actions, becomes someone others trust. Even those who disagree with them may find themselves listening. The consistency between their speech and their behavior provides weight. There is no cheapness in what they say. On the other hand, someone whose mouth is always moving, who makes promises they do not keep, who praises to your face and mocks you in your absence, who speaks of virtue but lives in hypocrisy, loses magnetism quickly. People may laugh at their jokes, they may gather around their drama, but deep down the trust is gone. The Stoics held integrity as central. Their advice about speech was an extension of that. Do not talk about calmness, show it in your reactions. Do not boast about your principles, live them when it is inconvenient. Let your words be a natural overflow of a disciplined mind, not a costume you wear to impress. When your inner peace meets purposeful speech, something powerful happens. Your words carry the flavor of your calm. You do not shout to persuade. You do not exaggerate to gain sympathy. You express yourself simply, clearly, directly. And because there is no frantic energy behind your voice, people can receive it more easily. In conversations, you may become the person who can name the truth that everyone else is circling around but afraid to say. You can do this without cruelty, because your intention is not to humiliate, but to clarify. You are not fueled by the need to win. You are fueled by the desire to see what is real. That kind of speech can change the direction of a room. You may not realize it, but we all look for this quality instinctively. In groups where everyone is talking loudly, you scan for the one person who, when they finally decide to speak, seems to bring the noise down, who can say in a few sentences what others have been trying to express in pages of words. You remember them. You quote them later. Their sentences become anchors in your mind. You do not have to be a natural orator to be that person. From a Stoic viewpoint, what matters is not wit, but alignment. Is what you are saying grounded in a calm, examine, Ned mind, or is it just another flare of your ego? When you begin to watch your speech with this awareness, you will likely see how often you have used words to run away from yourself. You may catch yourself gossiping just to feel superior, complaining just to avoid responsibility, making promises just to be liked, telling small lies just to smooth over discomfort. This recognition is not meant to shame you, it is meant to wake you up. Once you see it, you can begin the work of refining your speech. You can start with small acts, pausing before you share a rumor, choosing not to add one more negative comment when a group is tearing someone down, admitting, "I do not know," when you are tempted to pretend you understand something, being willing to say, "I was wrong," when your ego would rather defend itself. These simple phrases, spoken sincerely, carry immense weight in a world where most people are desperate to appear always right, always informed, always strong. From a Stoic perspective, you become attractive, in the deepest sense, not when you speak flawlessly, but when your speech reveals a mind that is honest, humble, and disciplined. People begin to relax around you, because they sense that your words will not be weapons carelessly thrown. They may be sharp when needed, but they will be directed, not wild. By now, you can see how these habits interlock. Deep listening, inner peace, and purposeful speech are not separate tricks. They are expressions of the same inner work. They all require you to step back from your impulses, to examine your judgments, to act from choice instead of reflex. As you continue along this path, as you listen more than you speak, as you choose calm over drama, as you treat your words as instruments of truth rather than tools of self-display, something in you begins to solidify. You are no longer just another participant in the noise. You are becoming, slowly and steadily, a center of gravity. If listening, calm and careful speech form the quiet surface of your presence, adversity reveals what lies underneath. Anyone can seem composed when life cooperates. When money flows, health holds, friends stay, and paths open, it is easy to speak of wisdom, strength, and virtue. You can rehearse every Stoic phrase, share every insight, and appear solid. Then something hits you. A relationship fractures without warning. A career you have built for years suddenly collapses. A person you trusted betrays you. Your body fails you in ways you did not expect this early. Plans that once felt certain become fog. In those moments, your philosophy is no longer theoretical. It is either a living discipline inside you or a thin layer of paint that begins to crack. From a Stoic perspective, this is not a cruel twist of fate. This is the test every human being inevitably faces. It is where your character is revealed to you and to everyone watching, whether you like it or not. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself that the obstacle is a way forward, that what stands in the path can be shaped into the path. He was not offering a pretty slogan. He was reminding himself, a man bearing the weight of an empire, that he did not get to choose the conditions of his character training. The world would choose those for him. His only choice was how to use them. When hardship comes, the first reaction is often very human. Why me? Why now? Why this? Your mind searches for someone to blame, some target for your anger. From a Stoic perspective, that question, why me, rarely gives you anything useful. It leads you in circles, deeper into self-pity, deeper into bitterness. It may feel justified, it may feel comforting for a time, but it does not strengthen you. There is another question that the Stoic mind quietly proposes in the middle of hardship. What can this make of me if I let it? What kind of person could I become on the other side of this if I choose to face it instead of fleeing? This does not erase the pain. It does not minimize the loss. It simply aims your suffering somewhere. Pain without direction corrodes. Pain given a direction can carve. The people you find most compelling, the ones whose presence feels heavy with reality, are rarely those who have never suffered. They are usually the ones who have walked through fire, who have tasted despair, who have seen things fall apart, and still did not become entirely hardened or cruel. You feel it in their silence. They do not panic easily because they have known worse. They do not mock your struggle because they remember their own. They do not collapse when something goes wrong today, because they have survived storms that lasted far longer. This is the magnetism of endured adversity. The Stoics never promised a painless life. They saw suffering as part of the human condition. What they suggested, instead, was that you could meet suffering with a particular stance, not romanticizing it, not chasing it, but when it inevitably appears, refusing to let it make you small. From this view, resilience is not a refusal to feel. It is a refusal to be defined solely by what you feel. You can grieve and still hold some clarity. You can be afraid and still move forward. You can be exhausted and still take one more careful step. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting with reason despite fear. Recklessness looks similar on the outside at times, charging forward blindly, ignoring risks, pretending you are untouched. But that is not Stoic courage. That is just a different flavor of fear, fear of being perceived as weak. Stoic courage is quieter. It says, yes, I am frightened, yes, I am in pain, yes, part of me wants to run. But I will not let those parts drive. I will acknowledge them, then decide from a deeper place. When you live this way, people begin to sense that you are not easily broken. Not because you are made of stone, but because you have already broken and reassembled yourself many times. Think of a time in your life that nearly erased you, a betrayal that made you question your worth, a loss that made the future feel meaningless, a public failure that burned your pride to ash. You may still feel the sting of that season. You may still carry scars, visible or invisible. From a Stoic perspective, those scars, if understood, are not disfigurements. They are proofs of survival. They show that you can be hurt and yet remain human. There is a bitterness that sometimes seeps into those who suffer, a quiet conviction that since they have been wounded, everyone must be punished. They walk through the world with sharp edges, ready to cut anyone who comes too close. They become impressive in a certain way, frightening, tough, efficient. But people do not feel They feel watched, judged, waiting for the moment they will also be discarded. There is another path. You can come out of hardship with more depth instead of more cruelty, with clearer eyes but not colder ones, with stronger boundaries but not impenetrable walls. Stoic philosophy suggests that this depends on how you interpret what happened. If you decide that your suffering proves the world is only hostile, you will harden accordingly. If you decide that your suffering was a training ground, an unwanted but undeniable teacher, you may emerge with something different, less visible but more powerful. You may gain patience, because you know how long real healing takes. You may gain compassion, because you understand that everyone you meet is carrying some invisible burden. You may gain focus, because you have seen how suddenly circumstances can shift, and you no longer wish to waste your short time on petty dramas. Others will feel this difference. They will not know the full story of what you have endured. They do not need to. They will feel the weight of it in you, not as heaviness that drags everyone down, but as grounding that stabilizes the space around you. From a Stoic point of view, one of the highest forms of courage is the decision to keep your heart open in a world that has given you many reasons to shut it. It is easier to grow cynical. It is safer, in some ways, to withdraw into irony, to laugh bitterly at sincerity, to dismiss hope as naive. But safety and aliveness rarely live in the same room. Courage, in this frame, is the choice to show up again, to love again knowing you can be hurt again, to commit again knowing you can fail again, to care again knowing nothing is guaranteed. Why is this magnetic? Because deep down, everyone is afraid of being broken. When they see someone who has broken and returned, who has chosen not to drown in self-pity, who has not turned into a permanent victim or a permanent executioner, they feel a strange mixture of relief and admiration. It gives them a glimpse of what might be possible for them when their time comes, or when their time returns. The Stoics had a name for this relationship with fate, a willingness not only to accept what happens, but to meet it with a kind of fierce consent. To say, if this is what life has given me, I will not spend my energy wishing for a different past. I will use what is here as raw material for my character. That stance does not mean you approve of injustice, that you sit quietly in the face of abuse, that you never resist what is wrong. Stoic courage includes the willingness to confront, to say no, to stand up against what violates your values. The point is not to submit to everything. The point is to recognize what is beyond your reversal and what is within your reach. The fact that something painful has happened may not be changeable. What you do with that fact remains open. To those watching, that distinction becomes clear over time. They see you lose, but they also see you rise. They see you grieve, but they also see you refuse to drown those around you in your grief. They see you insulted, but they do not see you spending the next 5 years arranging your life around revenge. It is this restraint, this decision not to let pain dictate your entire future, that draws respect. You become the person whose stories car, not because they are filled with drama, but because they are filled with transformation. You can speak about what happened to you without collapsing into it. Your identity is not fused to your worst moments. To cultivate this kind of courage, you do not need to search for suffering. Life will provide it when it chooses. Your task, from a Stoic perspective, is to prepare your inner stance in advance. You do this in smaller difficulties first. When a day does not go as planned, you observe how quickly you call it ruined. When someone speaks sharply to you, you notice how fast you build a whole narrative about their character. When you make a mistake, you catch the immediate urge to declare yourself a failure. In those moments, you practice correcting your own exaggerations. You say, "This is unpleasant, but not catastrophic. This hurts, but it does not erase me. This is a setback, not the end of my story." You train your mind not to turn every bump into a cliff. So, when real storms come, your reflex is a little different. You have rehearsed meeting discomfort with perspective. You have practiced breathing inside difficulty instead of holding your breath until you faint. You have chosen, again and again, to ask what now instead of only why me. People around you may crumble in similar storms, not because they are weak by nature, but because they never trained this response in smaller trials. Their minds magnify every hit into annihilation. They believe everything is over because they have never experienced their own ability to stand back up. From a Stoic point of view, this ability to keep moving slowly, consciously through hardship is one of the deepest sort of inner beauty. It is not glamorous. It rarely looks impressive on the surface, but it carves your character into something that others cannot help but notice. There is another facet to this courage that often goes unspoken. The courage to tell yourself the truth. When you face adversity, it is tempting to rewrite the story in ways that protect your pride, to paint yourself purely as a victim with no agency, to deny your part in what unfolded, to blame everything on fate or others or bad luck. Sometimes you truly were powerless. Sometimes you truly were wronged. Stoic philosophy does not deny that. But it also invites a stark question. In what ways did my own choices, my own patterns, make this harder than it had to be? This question can sting. It can cause shame if handled harshly, but if handled with honesty and self-respect, it can also be a doorway out of repeating the same pain. Courage here is the willingness to see your own complicity without collapsing into self-hatred. To say, yes, I ignored red flags. Yes, I avoided hard conversations. Yes, I numbed myself instead of acting. Yes, I broke promises to others or to myself. And then to ask, what will I do differently now? Why is this attractive? Because most people run from this level of self-examination. They hide behind excuses. They always have a story that shields them from learning. They may gain sympathy, but they do not grow. And over time, their life begins to feel hollow, stuck in endless repetitions of the same patterns. When you choose the braver path, you become rare. You are not perfect, but you are honest. You do not pretend to be blameless, but you also do not drown in guilt, responsibility without theatrical self-condemnation. Others can feel this. They sense that you are someone who can be trusted with truth. You will not twist every situation to preserve your ego. You are capable of saying, I was wrong. You are capable of changing. This brings us to another habit that intertwines with courage, one that Stoic thinkers guarded fiercely, the decision to live according to your principles, even at the cost of approval. If adversity exposes your depth, integrity reveals your spine. Many people can hold to their values when those values are praised. It is easy to act honest when honesty is rewarded. It is easy to speak of compassion when compassion is fashionable. It is easy to talk about boundaries when saying no earns you admiration. The true measure comes when the world pushes back, when telling the truth risks your comfort, when keeping a promise costs you status, when saying no makes others angry, when following your conscience means standing alone or being misunderstood or being called difficult. In those moments, the temptation to bend is strong. You might soften your words, not out of kindness but out of fear. You might keep silent when you know you should speak, just to avoid discomfort. You might agree outwardly with things you know are wrong, simply to keep the peace or stay included. Each time, a small part of you erodes. From a Stoic perspective, nothing is more corrosive to the soul than this repeated betrayal of your own sense of what is right. Seneca warned that a life spent chasing the favor of others leaves you enslaved to their shifting judgments, that you cannot be free while you are controlled by the fear of dissap. Roval. If your emotional state rises and falls entirely on whether people praise or criticize you, then they hold your strings. At first, chasing approval can seem harmless. You tell yourself you are just being polite, adaptable, easy to get along with. But gradually you forget where your genuine preferences end and others' expectations begin. You start measuring your worth entirely by external feedback. If you are liked, you are good. If you are criticized, you collapse. This kind of life cannot generate quiet magnetism because it is never truly quiet inside. It hums with constant anxiety, always scanning for cues, always adjusting, always afraid of stepping out of line. People may be pleased with you for a while. You become useful, agreeable, predictable, but underneath, something is missing. The sense that there is a real grounded person there, someone who would still stand the same way if the crowd turned. On the other hand, consider someone who lives with integrity. They do not enjoy conflict, but they do not run from it when a line they value is being crossed. They are kind, but their kindness does not include lying to make you comfortable. They can change their mind when given good reasons, but they will not betray their own conscience simply because it is inconvenient. You may not agree with all their positions. You may even be frustrated with their firmness at times, but you feel something in them that is not for sale. That feeling is deeply attractive. From a Stoic viewpoint, to be a person of integrity is to choose internal alignment over external applause. It is to decide that you would rather disappoint others than constantly disappoint yourself. This does not mean becoming rigid or self-righteous. Stoic integrity is not about believing you are always right. It is about being faithful to the best understanding you currently have, while remaining ready to revise that understanding when wisdom. Imagine you are offered an easy path that violates your values, a chance to gain money, status, or advantage by doing something you know is dishonest, even if no one would ever find out. Outwardly, nothing compels you to refuse. In fact, many voices may assure you it is normal, that everyone does it, that you are foolish if you do not. In that moment, what you truly worship is revealed. If your highest gods are comfort, convenience, or reputation, you will likely bow. The Stoic path asks you to worship something else, the quiet dignity of a clear conscience, to be able to sit alone with yourself at night and not feel the burning of knowing you have betrayed who you said you were. People underestimate how strongly this inner clarity radiates. When someone has built their life on small compromises, they often carry a certain nervousness. It leaks out in defensiveness, in exaggerated self-justifications, in aggressive judgments of others, anything to avoid looking at their own reflection. A person who chooses integrity, even when they could have gotten away with corruption, moves differently. There is less scrambling, less need to manage what others might discover, less hunger for constant validation because their main witness is their own mind. You can sense this in conversation. They do not need to convince you of their goodness. They are not obsessively advertising their moral credentials. They simply live in a way that over time proves itself. Stoic philosophy suggests that this is where real freedom begins. When you stop arranging your life around being liked and start arranging it around being honest, this shift will cost you. You may lose certain relationships that were built on your compliance. You may be called difficult, intense, too serious. You may be excluded from circles where people expect you to laugh at what you no longer find funny, to agree with what you know is wrong, to stay silent in the face of harm. The Stoics would ask you, is this loss greater than the loss of yourself? If you give up your integrity to avoid loneliness, you become lonely inside your own skin. You share space with people, but you cannot meet their eyes without feeling the quiet accusation that you have abandoned yourself. If you endure some loneliness to keep your values intact, that solitude is different. It may hurt, but it does not hollow you out. It becomes a place where you can hear your own thoughts clearly, where you can respect the person you are becoming, and in time, something else tends to happen. You begin to attract different people. Those who are tired of games feel strangely at ease with you because they know you will not flatter them to their face and slander them in private. They may not always like what you say, but they trust that it is real. They know that your yes means yes and your no means no. This is one of the most magnetic qualities a human can possess, consistency. To build it, from a Stoic perspective, you practice tiny acts of alignment. You keep the small promises you make, even when no one will check. If you say you will err, at a certain time you try to arrive. If you cannot, you acknowledge it instead of hiding. If you commit to a task, you honor that commitment, unless something truly beyond your control intervenes. When you say you believe in something, You look honestly at how your daily actions support or betray that belief. You do not use lofty words as decoration, you let them judge you. Over time, your inner and outer selves start to match. The gap between who you pretend to be and who you are shrinks. Living this way may feel like walking a narrower road, but it is solid under your feet. As these habits settle in you, your presence changes in ways that cannot be faked. People may not be able to explain why they trust you more than others, why they feel calmer with you than with those who shine brighter at first glance. But the reasons are simple. You listen. You are not constantly broadcasting your ego. You are calm. Your reactions are not wildfires. You speak with intention. Your words are not empty noise. You face hardship without collapsing into permanent victimhood. You choose your principles over cheap approval. These form a kind of gravity, not loud, not flashy, but undeniable, and beneath all of them, something else grows, a quiet commitment to keep becoming, to keep refining, to keep walking even when you stumble, because you know that the path of self-mastery does not end. To walk this path honestly, you have to accept something that your ego will resist. You will not wake up one day finished. There will be no morning where every flaw is erased, every weakness conquered, every doubt silenced. There will be no final version of you that is flawless, saint, able forever and immune to error. That fantasy, seducing as it is, does not belong to the real world. The Stoics understood this deeply. They spoke of the sage, the perfectly wise person, but most of them admitted openly that they themselves were not sages. They were students, travelers, people in progress. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of one of the mightiest empires on earth, did not write to himself as a man who had arrived. His journal is not a monument to perfection, it is a record of struggle. Today I lost my temper. Today I chased comfort. Today I cared too much about praise. Again and again he reminded himself to return to his principles, as if talking to a friend who keeps wandering off. From a Stoic perspective, this is not failure, this is the work. The sixth habit that gives a person a quiet, unmistakable magnetism is the refusal to worship perfection and the decision instead to commit to steady growth. Perfection, as most people chase it, is a performance. It is an image stitched together from carefully selected angles, polished achievements, curated words. It can look impressive from the outside, but behind it there is usually fear. Fear of being seen as flawed, fear of losing status, fear of being revealed as ordinary. This fear drives people to hide their mistakes, deny their ignorance, and pretend to be further along than they really are. They present a smooth surface to the world, hoping that if they can maintain it long enough, perhaps it will one day become true. But everyone on some level recognizes the cost of this act. To maintain the performance of perfection, you must sacrifice honesty. You must constantly edit yourself, conceal your struggle. Avoid situations where your limits might show. Life becomes a stage, and you are always on it. The tragedy is that this does not make you more attractive in any lasting sense. It makes you brittle. If your worth depends on never slipping, then every small mistake becomes a threat to your identity. If your image is built on appearing invulnerable, then you cannot allow yourself to be transparent, even with those closest to you. You live under a quiet tension, waiting to be exposed. People feel that tension, even if they cannot explain it. They sense that there is something guarded, something closed, something rigid in you. They may admire you from a distance, but they will hesitate to come too close, because they do not know what is real and what is performance. From a Stoic point of view, this is the opposite of wisdom. The Stoics did not aim to never fail. They aimed to fail more consciously, to see their failures clearly, without denial and without self-destruction, and to use them as material for growth. They had a word for someone like this, not a sage, but a person making progress, someone who knows they are not all they could be, but who has turned their face toward that higher standard and keeps walking. It says openly, I am not perfect. I lose my patience. I forget my values. I fall into jealousy, anger, laziness. I am capable of selfishness, of cowardice, of vanity. But I refuse to let these moments define me entirely. I will look at them. I will learn from them. I will do what I can today to be a little clearer, a little braver, a little more aligned than I was yesterday. This kind of honesty is far more magnetic than the cold illusion of perfection. Think about the people who have impacted you most. Were they flawless, or were they honest about their flaws while still standing up to meet them? There is someone who rarely admits error, whose stories always place them in the best light, who never apologizes without adding an excuse. You may be impressed by their accomplishments, you may be amused by their confidence, but do you feel invited to be real around them? Or do you feel pressured to match their performance? Then there is someone else. They speak calmly about the mistakes they have made, not to dramatize, but to share what they learned. They do not glorify their failures, but they do not hide them either. They treat them as teachers they did not ask for, yet did not refuse. In their presence you feel your own humanity become a little more bearable. You do not need to pretend as much. You do not need to carry the armor of constant impressiveness. You can admit you are struggling without feeling instantly judged. This second person may not be the most outwardly dazzling, but they are the one you will remember, because being near them makes you feel less ashamed of being in progress yourself. From a Stoic perspective, that is real attraction, not the pull towards something that makes you feel inadequate, but the pull towards something that makes you feel possible. To live this way, you have to make peace with the fact that you will always be unfinished. This does not mean you surrender to every weakness. It does not mean you stop striving. Stoic growth is not indulgence. It is discipline applied with patience. Every day gives you chances to practice. You wake up and notice the first thoughts in your mind. Perhaps they are heavy, already full of worry, or sharp, already judging yourself or others. You could slip into them without question, let them dictate the whole tone of your day. Instead, seeing yourself as a student of your own mind, you pause. You watch those thoughts with a bit more distance. You remind yourself, I do not control that they appeared, but I can choose what I do next. Maybe today your victory is small. You do not defeat the pattern entirely, but you add one moment of space where there used to be only reflex. You respond slightly more thoughtfully than yesterday. You waste a little less time on what you cannot change. You interrupt a complaint halfway and choose a more useful action. To someone chasing perfection, these minor shifts might feel like nothing. They want transformation that is dramatic, immediate, visible. To someone committed to growth, these small movements are everything. They know that character is carved one decision at a time. The Stoics often practiced an evening reflection. At the end of the day, they would look back and ask, where did I act according to my values? Where did I fall short? What can I do differently tomorrow? If you adopt this practice, even in a simple way, you begin to treat your life as training rather than as a test you have already failed. You remember a conversation in which you snapped defensively. Instead of burying the memory or blaming the other person entirely, you ask, what exactly triggered me? Was I protecting my pride? Was I unwilling to admit I did not know something? What would a wiser version of me have said or done? You recall an opportunity you avoided because of fear. Rather than calling yourself weak and leaving it there, you examine the fear. What were you imagining would happen? How realistic was that? If you meet a similar situation again, what concrete step could you take that would be slightly braver? Over time, this kind of reflection shapes your character more than any single burst of motivation. You are not waiting for a perfect day to be someone new. You are using imperfect days as your raw material. From a Stoic perspective, this is how you honor your own potential. Not by fantasizing about a future self who never struggles, but by working with the real self who struggles right now. There is another dimension to this that touches directly on magnetism. Perfectionism tends to create distance between people. When someone acts as if they have everything figured out, others around them feel pressure to pretend the same. Real connection withers in that atmosphere, replaced by comparison and subtle competition. Growth, honestly pursued, does the opposite. It closes distance. If you can say, without self-pity and without pride, I am still learning how to manage my anger, my fear, my impatience, my attachments, you create space for others to be honest about their own work. You do not invite them into a contest, you invite them into a journey. People are drawn toward that. They are tired of masks, tired of conversations where every weakness is hidden, every story is edited, every vulnerability is wrapped in layers of irony. From a Stoic view, being open about your growth does not mean exposing everything to everyone. It means you stop pretending that you have no work left to do. It means you can share your struggles with those who have earned your trust, not to gain pity, but to exchange wisdom. This makes your presence more approachable. You are not above others, looking down from the heights of supposed perfection. You are walking beside them, maybe a few steps ahead in some areas, a few steps behind in others, but always moving. There is humility in this posture, but there is also strength. Humility, in the Stoic sense, is not self-hatred. It is clarity. You see yourself accurately, as neither a god nor a worm, but as a human being with capacities and limits. You accept that you will do things you regret. You also accept that you can do things you will be proud of. Strength here is the refusal to use your limitations as excuses. You acknowledge that you get angry easily, then you practice patience anyway. You admit that you are afraid of confrontation, then you have the important conversation anyway. You confess that you often crave approval, then you still choose truth over flattery when it matters. This combination, humility and persistence, generates a particular kind of respect. People may not say it aloud, but they register it. They see that you do not hide your imperfections behind arrogance. They also see that you do not surrender to them. You are engaged in an ongoing, honest effort to become more aligned with your values. This is inspiring in a way that perfection never can be. Perfection intimidates. Growth invites. Think of someone who is very skilled at something you care about. They could easily make you feel small by boasting, by acting bored with beginners, by implying that what you struggle with is trivial to them. Now imagine that same skilled person remembers what it felt like to be where you are. They talk about their early mistakes without romanticizing them. They show you what they have learned, not as if handing down wisdom from a throne, but as a fellow traveler who still remembers the rough parts of the road. With the first person, you might feel impressed but distant. With the second, you feel encouraged to continue. Your own path of growth can give others that same permission, not because you constantly preach at them, but because they can see the evidence in how you live. You make attempts, you fail, you correct, you try again. And you do this without constant drama, without advertising every small step, without demanding applause. From a Stoic perspective, this steadiness is a form of quiet greatness. The world loves flashes, overnight transformations, dramatic reinventions, but most meaningful change happens slowly, too slowly to satisfy spectacle. It unfolds in your private choices, in the thousands of moments when no one is watching. When you accept that, you stop needing to display every improvement. You do not have to post your progress, announce each inner shift, make every step into a story. You allow your life itself to be the story, one that only those who walk with you closely will fully read. This restraint deepens your magnetism. It is one thing to claim that you are working on yourself. It is another to simply work and let the results speak quietly over time. There is also enormous freedom in releasing perfection. If you believe you must be flawless to be worthy, you will hesitate to start anything where you might fail publicly. You will avoid new experiences that might expose your inexperience. You will stay frozen in what you already know how to do, not because you love it, but because it is the only place where your image feels secure. The Stoics would see this as a tragic waste of your brief life. From their standpoint, you are here not to maintain an image, but to test and refine your character in real situations. That requires walking into uncertainty. It requires being a beginner, often. It requires risking mistakes, misunderstandings, even humiliation. When you adopt growth as your compass instead of perfection, you ask different questions when facing something new. Not, what if I look foolish? But, what might I learn? Not, what if I fail? But what kind of person could I become by attempting this, even if I do fail? This shift does not erase fear. It places fear in context. You may still feel anxious before speaking in front of others, sharing something vulnerable, or stepping into a new role. But instead of obeying that anxiety blindly, you weigh it against your commitment to progress. You decide, consciously, that a temporary feeling of discomfort is a price worth paying for long-term growth. They see you stepping forward in areas where many hold back. They see you act, even when you are clearly not entirely comfortable. They realize that you are not waiting until you feel invincible to live. This kind of visible, imperfect courage is magnetic, because it resonates with a truth everyone carries. Nobody really feels fully ready. Those who move anyway are not different in kind, only in practice. From a Stoic perspective, focusing on growth also changes your relationship with outcomes. Modern culture trains you to measure your life almost entirely by results. Did you win or lose? Did you get the job or not? Did the relationship last or end? Did the project succeed or fail? Each outcome becomes a verdict on your worth. The Stoics challenge this deeply. They point to a central distinction between what you can control and what you cannot. You can control your effort, your preparation, your integrity, the values behind your actions. You cannot fully control the response of others, the twists of fortune, the failures of other people to meet you. If you measure yourself only by outcomes, you will constantly feel at the mercy of forces beyond you. If you measure yourself by your effort and your adherence to your principles, you reclaim your agency. This does not mean you become indifferent to results. You still aim wisely. You still adjust your methods. You still care whether your actions have the effects you intend. But you do not attach your identity to those results. You do not let a failed attempt become a condemnation of your entire being. You can say, that did not work, without adding, therefore I am nothing. You can say, this relationship ended, without adding, therefore I am unlovable. You can say, they rejected me, without adding, therefore I am worthless. Instead, you ask, what can I do better next time? How can I respond in a way that honors my values? What lesson is hidden inside this outcome? This orientation makes you more resilient, but it also makes you more trustworthy. People learn by watching you that you do not collapse into blame when things go wrong. You do not always point outward, making every failure someone else's fault. You assess your part soberly. You adjust. You stay in motion. It is difficult to trust someone whose sense of self is so fragile that every setback sends them into drama, anger, or despair. You find yourself walking carefully around them, afraid to be honest, because you know they cannot hold reality without breaking. On the other hand, when you see someone meet disappointment with honesty, groundedness, and a willingness to learn, you know that if something between you falters, they will not instantly demonize you or themselves. They will look for understanding, for responsibility, for the next step. This is not about being calm all the time. It is about not letting your darkest interpretations rule the entire story. Finally, focusing on growth instead of perfection dissolves a subtle, dangerous arrogance. Perfectionism often hides a belief that you are uniquely defective, uniquely broken, or uniquely deserving of a flawless life. Growth accepts that you are made of the same material as every other human being who has ever lived, capable of error, capable of change. From a Stoic perspective, humility in the face of our shared human condition is essential to wisdom. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that he, like everyone else, was subject to sickness, aging, error, death. This did not make him helpless, it made him realistic. When you see yourself as one human among many, all learning, all stumbling, all trying in their own limited ways, resentment softens, envy shifts. Instead of seeing others as threats to your fragile image, you see them as mirrors and teachers. Someone more disciplined than you shows what is possible if you train. Someone more patient reveals where you are still impulsive. Someone who has failed more than you but still moves forward demonstrates a resilience you can cultivate. In this atmosphere, growth does not feel like punishment. It feels like participation in the human story. As you embody this attitude more deeply, so nothing changes in how others experience you. You no longer come across as someone obsessed with proving you are ahead. You appear instead as someone devoted to becoming more honest, more courageous, more aligned. You can celebrate others without feeling that their success diminishes you. You can admit your ignorance without shame, because you see learning as a strength, not an admission of permanent inferiority. You can change your mind without feeling humiliated, because you value truth over the illusion of always being right. All of this combines into a presence that is strangely compelling. You do not burn with the dazzling intensity of someone constantly trying to impress. You do not dominate rooms with noise. You do not present yourself as a finished product. You stand instead as a person in motion who is not ashamed of the movement. Your calm listening, your inner steadiness, your truthful speech, your courage in adversity, your commitment to your principles, and your dedication to growth form a single coherent energy. Around you, people feel both challenged and comforted. Challenged because your life quietly raises the question, what might I become if I stopped running from my own training? Because your example proves that one does not need to be perfect to be worthy, only willing to work. At this point, your magnetism is no longer about tricks, tactics, or external advantages. It is the natural side effect of self-mastery in progress. You are not chasing eyes. You are not performing for applause. You are shaping yourself according to values that would matter even if no one ever saw your effort. From a Stoic perspective, this is the only the life where your attention is anchored not in the endless mirror of other people's opinions, but in the quiet, demanding, liberating work of becoming the kind of person you yourself can respect. Others may approve of you for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with who you really are. They may like your looks, your status, your entertainment value, your usefulness to them. Approval can be bought, faked, manipulated, or lost overnight. Respect is different. Respect, in the deepest sense, is how your own mind looks at you when the room is empty and the performance is over. It is whether you can meet your own gaze without flinching, whether, beneath all the noise, you know you have tried to live in alignment with what you claim to value. From a Stoic perspective, this quiet self-respect is the true foundation of any lasting attraction, because whatever others may think, you cannot outrun your own witness. You take yourself into every room, every conversation, every relationship. If that inner witness is disgusted, ashamed, or unconvinced, no amount of external praise will fully silence it. You can feel the difference in two people who look similar on the outside. One has built their image carefully, chasing trends, managing impressions, tailoring their words to whoever stands in front of them. They receive attention, they generate reactions. But if you listen closely, there is a certain hollowness underneath. They laugh a little too loudly. They insist on their importance a little too often. Their eyes watch other people's eyes, always checking, am I enough yet? The other may be less polished. Their clothes are simple. Their saint, while is not designed for maximum effect. But there is a groundedness in them. They are not constantly checking the room to see how they are being received. They do not panic when silence stretches. They rest more fully in their own skin. That groundedness is rarely an accident. From a Stoic point of view, it is the cumulative result of living in a way that your own mind can respect. You have listened when it was easier to talk. You have remained calm when it was easier to explode. You have chosen truthful words when lies would have kept you safe. You have faced hardship when escape was an option. You have stayed faithful to your principles when bending would have brought applause. You have accepted that you are unfinished and still chosen to show up. These choices do not make you perfect, they make you real, and reality, in the long run, is more compelling than illusion. There is a darkness in modern life that Stoic thinkers would recognize immediately, though it wears new clothes. A constant invitation to forget yourself. Endless scrolling designed to keep your attention scattered. constant entertainment smoothing over every quiet moment in which you might have heard your own thoughts, algorithms feeding you outrage, envy, comparison, so you always feel slightly discontent, slightly behind, slightly not enough. In such an environment, deep presence becomes rare, and what is rare becomes valuable. When everyone is half elsewhere, the person who is fully here stands out. When everyone is addicted to being seen, the one who is more concerned with seeing clearly becomes magnetic. When everyone is chasing more, the one who has learned how to be steady with less emits a kind of quiet defiance. From a Stoic perspective, your task is not to flee the age you live in, but to refuse to be entirely shaped by it, to carve out an inner space that is not owned by trends, not driven by outrage, not defined by constant comparison. This is where discipline enters the picture. Not the shallow kind that exists only to impress, to post, to brag, not a performance of toughness. The discipline Stoic thinkers pointed toward is older and more serious. It is the ability to say no to yourself for the sake of something higher than immediate comfort. You can see how each of the habits we have explored is a form of this discipline. To listen deeply, you must discipline your ego, your hunger to shine, your impatience. To remain calm, you must discipline your reactions, refusing to be dragged into every provocation. To speak with purpose, you must discipline your tongue, holding back the flood of unnecessary words. To face adversity with courage, you must discipline your fear, choosing action over paralysis. To live with integrity, you must discipline your desire to please, to fit in, to be admired. To focus on growth instead of perfection, you must discipline your pride, accepting that you will stumble in front of others and still move. Each act of discipline is small. Taken alone, it may seem trivial. But habits are built the same way stone walls are built, one brick at a time. And a life that others feel drawn toward is built the same way. If you look at someone whose presence feels powerfully calm, it is tempting to imagine they were simply born that way. Stoic philosophy suggests something less magical. They likely spent years making choices that most people avoid, choices that strengthened their inner structure while others chased surface gains. They sat with discomfort instead of medicating it instantly. They had hard conversations instead of letting resentment rot in silence. They told the truth when it made them look less impressive. They apologized when they were wrong instead of defending their pride. They said no to distractions that would have diluted their focus. They walked away from situations that violated their values even when staying would have been easier. The world does not always applaud these decisions. Often, it punishes them in the short term. You may lose opportunities by refusing to lie. You may lose people by refusing to betray yourself to keep them. You may feel temporarily more alone when you stop participating in dramas that used to define your social life. From a Stoic viewpoint, this pain is not a sign you have gone wrong. It is a sign you have begun to separate yourself from the crowd's momentum. You are no longer merely being carried. You have started to steer. It is in this steering that your uniqueness emerges, not the superficial uniqueness advertised by consumer culture, the uniqueness of wardrobe, of aesthetic, of brand, but the uniqueness of character, of how you respond to the inevitable tests of existence. Two people encounter the same setback. One spirals into blame, gossip, bitterness. The other feels the same sting, but after the initial reaction asks, "How can I use this?" Over time, those choices create different lives, and, just as importantly, different atmospheres. From a Stoic perspective, the atmosphere you carry is your true look. Clothes, style, physical beauty, these things can enhance, but they cannot replace your inner climate. If, beneath all your outer details, your atmosphere is anxious, frantic, and needy, people will feel it. If, beneath whatever shape you inhabit, your atmosphere is steady, honest, and awake, people will feel that too. This is not about blaming yourself for every struggle in human connection. It is about acknowledging the power you do have, the power to shape the only domain the Stoics insist you truly own, your own mind and actions. How does this look in the ordinary struggles of a day? Imagine you walk into a room full of people you do not know. For many, this situation triggers a storm of thoughts. What do they think of me? Do I look good enough? Am I interesting enough? What do I say to seem confident? Every movement is subtly directed outward, searching for signs of approval or rejection. From a Stoic perspective, this is a recipe for inner chaos. You have given away all authority over your state to strangers. What if, instead, you walked into the same room with a different internal question? Not, will they like me? But, who can I understand here? Who can I listen to? Who might benefit even slightly from my steadiness? Suddenly your attention turns outward in a healthier way. You are not scanning for judgment. You are looking for people, for stories, for shared humanity. You notice someone else standing alone, nervous. You start a simple conversation, not to prove anything but to ease both your anxieties. You still care how you are received. You still notice the atmosphere. But your worth is not hanging by the thread of every small reaction. Oh, you are practicing being, regardless of anyone's instant approval. Over time, moving through social worlds this way changes them. People sense your lack of desperation. They sense that you are not trying to extract validation from them. This lowers their defenses. They feel less used. They can relax and be more themselves. This is one form of silent magnetism. Another appears in conflict. At some point, someone will misunderstand you, disrespect you, or attack you. Your first impulse may be to strike back, to prove your superiority, to win the argument so completely that they never dare confront you again. Modern culture often celebrates this. Quick comebacks, brutal takedowns, public revenge. The crowd cheers when someone is humiliated sharply enough. Stoic philosophy invites a different experiment. When someone offends you, pause long enough to ask, what is under my reaction? Is it truly justice that I want, or is my pride wounded? Am I about to act from reason, or from a desire to hurt them as they hurt me? This pause is not natural at first. It feels like a small death, because your ego wants immediate revenge. But if you can hold even a second of space, you open the door to a more powerful response. Sometimes a strong boundary is needed. Calmly, you say no. You name what is unacceptable. You withdraw from a toxic dynamic, but you do this without the extra poison of cruelty. Other times, you decide that the insult does not require a response at all. The Stoics often reminded themselves that people act according to their understanding. If someone is ignorant, wounded, or ruled by their own demons, their behavior says more about their state than about your worth. In that light, you may choose to conserve your energy. You do not let every provocation drag you into a battle. You do not treat every slight as a war. You know who you are. You do not need to prove it to everyone who misunderstands. This restraint, especially when you clearly have the power to cut back, is profoundly attractive. People see that you are not a slave to your temper. They see that you can wield strength without addiction to harm. They may even test you at first, unconsciously, to see if you are like everyone else. When they discover that you will defend yourself without descending into pettiness, their respect deepens. You become, in their eyes, someone safe to be honest with, because they know you will not weaponize their vulnerability later to win an argument. From a Stoic perspective, the deepest power is control over yourself, not over others. When you restrain your anger, when you refuse to let envy dictate your behavior, when you do not collapse into people pleasing at the first sign of disapproval, you are practicing that power. It is slow, exhausting work at times. It can feel like swimming against the inner tide. But every time you succeed, even partially, you strengthen the part of you that can choose. In relationships, this kind of self-governance is priceless. Consider love, friendship, family. These bonds bring some of the most intense joys and most searing pains a human can know. They also reveal your habits with brutal clarity. If you are desperate for approval, you may cling, manipulate, or shapeshift to avoid being abandoned. If you are ruled by your temper, you may say things in anger that shatter trust for years. Tolerate discomfort. You may choose short-term pleasure over long-term loyalty, betraying people who counted on your steadiness. From a Stoic lens, attraction that does not translate into reliability is fragile. The person who draws everyone in but cannot be relied upon in the dark is not truly admirable. In contrast, someone whose magnetism includes dependability becomes rare. How do you move toward that? You start again in small ways. When you make a promise, you treat it as a serious act. You do not offer commitments lightly just to feel good in the moment. When your emotions fluctuate, you do not let them rewrite your values overnight. You may feel angry, but you do not suddenly abandon someone you have pledged to stand with because your mood shifted. This does not mean staying in harmful situations no matter what. Stoic philosophy does not ask you to tolerate abuse or to remain where your dignity is consistently violated. It asks you to be intentional, to leave, if you must, from a place of clarity, not from a burst of unexamined impulse. Your steadiness under pressure becomes part of your aura. In difficult conversations with those you love, you aim to hear before defending. You speak honestly about your needs without dramatizing. You remain open to being wrong. You apologize when your behavior does not match your values. These actions do not make you invulnerable to loss. People will still leave sometimes. Relationships will still end. But in the quiet after, you will be able to say, even through the ache, that you tried to show up with integrity. That knowledge, stored in your nervous system, affects how you carry yourself in the next chapter. You will be less haunted by what you failed to do and more focused on what you can do now. From a Stoic point of view, this is how you slowly transform suffering into wisdom, not by denying the hurt, nor by pretending everything happens for some sentimental reason, but by refusing to waste your pain. Every loss, every disappointment, every betrayal becomes either a weight that drags you under or a weight you learn to carry with more strength. The difference lies not in the event, but in your response. As you make this response a habit, your face will change, not in the way creams, surgeries, or filters change it, but in the way expression and experience carve it. Your eyes may grow more serious, but also more kind. Lines may form where repeated frowns or repeated gentle smiles have lived. There will be a depth there that no surface beauty can imitate. People might not know what they are seeing. They may simply say, "You have a presence." That word, presence, is modern language for something the Stoics knew well, the expression of a soul that has stopped running from itself. There is one more element that quietly intensifies all of this, and Stoic philosophy returns to it again and again. An awareness that everything you love, everything you fear, everything you are, is temporary. At first, this awareness seems dark, even unbearable, the recognition that every person you care for is mortal, that your own body will fail, that your achievements will be forgotten, that your name will fade. But the Stoics did not dwell on mortality to depress themselves. They used it as a precise tool to cut away what does not matter. When you remember, even briefly, that your time is finite, that no day is guaranteed, that this conversation could be your last with this person, your priorities shift. Petty arguments lose their appeal. Delayed kindness looks more foolish. Wasting hours in empty distractions feels more costly. From this perspective, each moment becomes heavier, not with dread, but with significance. You begin to ask, more often, is this worthy of the limited life I have left? This question, applied to your habits, sharpens them. Is it worthy of your limited life to spend years performing for people who will not remember you? Is it worthy to destroy your health and mind-chasing standards you did not choose? Is it worthy to silence your own conscience so that strangers might nod approvingly for a few seconds? The answer, when seen from the shadow of mortality, is usually clear. On the other hand, is it worthy to spend time training your mind to be calmer, your speech to be truer, your courage to be steadier? Is it worthy to sit with a friend in pain fully present? Is it worthy to work at something that matters to you, even if it brings no fame? Is it worthy to become a person who makes others feel more human when they stand near you? Seen in the light of your eventual death, these investments make sense. From a Stoic perspective, remembering that you will die is not morbid. It is clarifying. It makes you more alive. It pulls you out of trivial games and nods you toward substance. And substance, in a world obsessed with surfaces, is magnetic. You do not have to talk constantly about death for this awareness to change you. It works quietly in the background, reordering what you chase, what you tolerate, what you value. You may find yours. Elf more willing to tell someone you love them, knowing that opportunities are not infinite. More willing to forgive, not because what happened was acceptable, but because you do not want to carry certain poisons to your grave. More willing to take risks aligned with your values, because you understand that safety, in the ultimate sense, does not exist. This willingness gives your life a certain intensity, not frantic, but focused. Others can feel it. They notice that you do not waste as much time complaining about trivial things, that you are less interested in gossip, that you bring conversations gently back to what actually matters. You are no longer living as if your existence were a rehearsal. You are living as if it counts because it does. The combination of all these elements, listening, calm, purposeful speech, courage, integrity, growth, and a clear view of your mortality, forms a character that does not need to demand attention. It draws it, not in a loud rush, but in a slow, enduring way. People may not be able to label it. They may describe it simply as, I like being around them. I feel calmer, clearer, more honest near them. I feel invited to be better, not by pressure, but by example. From a Stoic perspective, this is the kind of magnetism worth aspiring to, not because it makes you superior, but because in cultivating it, you are forced to confront the very things that keep you from truly living. You cannot develop deep listening without facing your ego. You cannot cultivate inner peace without confronting your reactivity. You cannot speak with purpose without examining your honesty. You cannot face adversity with courage without accepting your AR. You cannot value integrity over approval without facing your loneliness and your hunger to belong. You cannot focus on growth without letting go of the fantasy that one day you will be flawless and done. Each habit pulls you into a more intimate relationship with yourself, and as that relationship changes, your relationship with the world changes. You are no longer just another person scrambling on the surface. You are sinking roots. The world will continue to be loud. People will continue to chase illusions. You will still feel the pull of those same illusions. You are not immune. But from a Stoic standpoint, you do not need immunity to live differently. You need awareness and the willingness again and again to choose the harder, truer way. This is the quiet revolution Stoicism proposes, not a revolt out there shouting at the world to change, but a revolt in here, refusing to let the world dictate the quality of your own soul. In the end, that quality is what everyone around you will feel most strongly. Other people may not know the story of your life, but they can feel its echo in you. They will not see the hours you spent wrestling with your temper, your fear, your desire to please. They will not watch you sitting alone in silence, confronting your own thoughts instead of burying them under distraction. They will not hear the private questions you ask yourself at night, the ones that cut through your excuses. Yet every one of those unseen moments shapes the quality of your presence, and that quality is what reaches them first. You know this from the other side. You have met people whose faces are pleasant, whose words are smooth, whose lives look impressive, and yet something in you stays tense around them. You cannot always explain why. There is just a mismatch between what they present and what you sense. You have also met people who do not seek the spotlight, whose appearance does not scream for attention, who say far less than others, but in whose presence your shoulders drop almost without permission. The air around them feels thicker, more settled. There is less performance, more reality. Stoic philosophy points again and again to the source of that difference. It is not a mystical force. It is the result of how a person has handled their own mind again and again, when no one was cheering, when no one was looking, when no one would have known if they had chosen the easier path. You cannot hide your habits forever. They live in your posture, in your gaze, in the timing of your reactions. They speak in the silence between your words. So when you ask how to become more attractive in the deepest sense, Stoic thinkers would ask you a different question. To whom do you wish to be attractive, and for what purpose? If your goal is simply to draw more eyes, more short-term desire, more shallow approval, then there are many strategies the modern world will gladly sell you. Tricks, personas, poses. They may work for a time, they may give you spikes of attention, but they will not give you peace. From a Stoic perspective, magnetism is not the goal, it is a side effect. The aim is to live well, to act according to reason and virtue in the brief span you have been given. If, as a consequence of that inner alignment, people feel drawn to you, that is their response to something real, not your primary target. Aim matters because it keeps you from turning even Stoic habits into another performance. You do not listen deeply so that people will call you wise. You listen because a rational being honors reality, and other minds are part of that reality. You do not cultivate calm so that you can manipulate others with your mysterious composure. You cultivate calm so that you can see clearly and choose well. You do not speak with purpose so that your words can dominate a room. You speak with purpose because truth deserves care. When attraction arises from this place, it is cleaner. You are not using other people as mirrors to admire yourself in. You are simply becoming more yourself and letting the effects land where they may. This becomes especially important in your closest relationships. Modern culture often treats attraction as a game of tactics, particularly in romance. Say this, wait that long. Appear interested but not too interested. Keep them guessing, never reveal too much. Behind many of these rules lies a single assumption that you must constantly manage the other person's perception of you, or you will be abandoned. From a Stoic point of view, this is a fragile and exhausting way to live. It also breeds mistrust. If you are always strategizing, how can anyone ever relax near you? If you are always half-performing, who is the person they are actually with? Stoic-inspired attraction frees you from some of this burden. You are not trying to be seen as perfect. You are trying to be seen as you are, a person in progress, committed to growth, anchored in values. You will still feel anxiety, you will still fear rejection, but you will not let those fears turn you into someone you cannot respect. In love, this creates a different atmosphere. Instead of clinging, you choose. Instead of playing with someone's emotions to keep them hooked, you communicate with clarity. Instead of demanding that they complete you, you arrive as a whole person who has work left to do, and you invite them to walk beside you, not carry you. Stoic thinkers often emphasize that humans are social creatures, designed for cooperation, not possession. But you do not treat the other person as an object that exists to soothe you. You treat them as a fellow mind with their own journey, their own fears, their own need for respect. There is something deeply compelling about being with someone who does not try to own you, who cares for you without trying to control your every movement, who sets boundaries without punishment or drama, who can say, I love you, and also say, I will not betray myself to keep this. In the presence of such a person, you may find your own breathing changes. You are not walking on eggshells, terrified that one mistake will trigger an explosion or an abandonment. You are in the orbit of someone who can feel deeply and yet remain steady. From a Stoic perspective, becoming that kind of partner is one of the most powerful forms of magnetism you can cultivate. Not the magnetism that pulls people into chaos, but the magnetism that invites them into mutual clarity. The same qualities translate into every other domain where human lives intersect. In work, for instance, you will inevitably deal with pressure, deadliness, miscommunication, and ego. Titles may vary, but the underlying dynamics remain strangely similar. Some people lead by fear, others by flattery. Some hoard credit, others deflect responsibility. Many live in a constant state of quiet panic, chasing the next achievement to avoid feeling empty. A Stoic stance in such an environment feels revolutionary. Even if you never use the word, you show up. You do your work with care, not because someone is watching, but because you have decided to aim for excellence in whatever role fate has handed you. You do not gossip about colleagues for sport. You do not inflate your accomplishments beyond reality. You do not trample your values to gain short-term advantages. When conflicts arise, as they inevitably do, you aim to understand before you retaliate. You are willing to have difficult conversations without turning them into character assassinations. You can receive feedback, even harsh feedback, without letting it immediately collapse your self-worth or provoke blind defensiveness. You separate what is useful in the criticism from what is merely noise. You do not pretend you are unaffected, but you also do not let every workplace storm drag you into emotional shipwreck. Over time, people notice this. You may not be the loudest in meetings or the most charismatic at events, but they sense that you are someone they can rely on, someone who does not crumble or explode under pressure. In a world where many are guided mainly by self-interest, the simple fact that you act from principle consistently sets you apart. If you ever find yourself in a position of formal leadership, this inner discipline becomes even more visible. Stoics thought deeply about roles, about what it meant to be a good parent, a good citizen, a good leader. They suggested that in each role you hold, you ask, what does virtue look like here? Whether of a team, a family, or a community, Stoic virtue might look like listening carefully to those under your care, like taking responsibility when things go wrong, rather than simply blaming those below you, like making decisions based not on what flatters your ego, but on what aligns with justice and wisdom, even if it is unpopular. A leader who acts this way carries a different taste. People follow not only because they must, but because they trust the direction. They may disagree at times, but they do not feel constantly manipulated. That trust, once earned, is its own form of attraction, not sexual, not romantic, but deep, the pull to stand beside someone whose compass is not easily shaken. Stoic magnetism does not only appear in crowds, though. It may be most clearly revealed in how you handle solitude. Many people live in terror of being alone with themselves. Silence becomes a threat because in silence they hear the echo of everything unresolved, so they keep themselves saturated with noise, with screens, with constant contact. Their lives are full of people, yet they often feel lonelier than ever because the relationship they most avoid, the relationship with their own mind, remains broken. Stoic thinkers suggest almost the opposite rhythm. Use solitude as a training ground, not to indulge your worst spirals, but to become a better companion to yourself. Sit without distraction for a short time. Watch your thoughts. Some will be ugly, jealousy, resentment, fear. Some will be silly. Some will be tender. Instead of treating this inner stream as an unbearable enemy, treat it as your material for practice. You do not have to believe every thought. You do not have to obey every impulse. You can choose which ones to feed. As you grow more comfortable with your own mind, something subtle shifts in how you relate to others. You are less likely to cling out of desperation because you no longer experience your own company as pure torment. You can be alone without feeling annihilated. This does not mean you stop needing people. Stoic philosophy consistently recognizes that humans thrive in connection. But your connections become cleaner. You are with others because you value them, not because you cannot stand yourself. People feel this difference. It is draining to spend time with someone who sees you primarily as an escape from their own inner emptiness. Every pause in conversation becomes frightening to them. Every small gap must be filled. Underneath, they are terrified you will leave because without you they collapse. It is much easier, and strangely more compelling, to be with someone who can sit in silence without panic, who can spend time apart without falling into catastrophe, who chooses you again and again, not as a crutch but as a deliberate act. This is another layer of silent magnetism, the energy of someone who could stand on their own but gladly walks with others. In the modern world, your relationship with solitude is constantly under attack. Devices ensure that you never have to be alone with your thoughts unless you deliberately choose it. Every empty second can be filled with flickering images, borrowed emotions, other people's opinions. Stoic practice asks you to sometimes turn away from this constant flood. Not because technology is evil, but because unending stimulation keeps you from ever learning what you genuinely think, feel, and value. When you reclaim even small pockets of unmediated time, you give your mind room to settle. In that settling, you may begin to notice where your life has drifted away from your real priorities. You may realize how much of your behavior has been automated by fear of missing out, of being left behind. This realization can be uncomfortable, but it is also the starting point of change. As your inner life becomes less enslaved to the latest trend, as you detach slightly from the endless comparisons of social media, your sense of self stabilizes. You are less likely to chase every new image of success. You are more likely to ask, quietly, what actually matters to me, in my limited time, in my specific situation. That question, pursued honestly, makes you less generic. From a Stoic perspective, each human shares a common nature, but each also has specific circumstances, talents, and challenges. Your task is not to become an imitation of someone else's path, but to apply shared principles to your own lane. When you stop trying to copy and begin trying to embody, the energy you emit changes. You might no longer fit neatly into other people's boxes. Some may find this unsettling. Others, especially those tired of being surrounded by copies, will find it profoundly refreshing. It is important to accept that not everyone will be drawn to you as you become more grounded in yourself. Stoic philosophy never promised universal admira. It often warned that living according to reason and virtue may provoke misunderstanding, hostility, or envy. If you refuse to participate in gossip, some will call you arrogant or aloof. If you do not laugh at certain jokes, some will call you humorless. If you decline invitations that conflict with your values or your need for rest, some will call you selfish. If you speak calmly in rooms that feed on outrage, some will call you detached. You cannot control these interpretations. What you can control from a Stoic standpoint is your fidelity to what you know to be right. You can control whether you respond to misunderstanding with bitterness or with patient clarity. You can control whether you twist yourself back into old, dishonest shapes just to ease the discomfort of being different. Your magnetism, at this depth, is not measured by how many people swarm around you, but by the truth of the connections that remain. Some will drift away as you change. They were responding to an earlier version of you, to a performance you can no longer maintain. Others will draw nearer. They will be those who are also tired of acting, those who have felt the poverty of a life built on external flash and are searching, perhaps without knowing the word, for something like virtue. When two people oriented this way meet, there is often a quiet recognition. You may not share tastes, backgrounds, or beliefs, but you share a seriousness about reality, a refusal to spend your short existence entirely in masks. These are the people with whom you can build the kind of bonds that endure change, challenge, and time. Your own commitment to Stoic habits will be reinforced. You will remind each other of what matters when the world tries to make you forget. None of this means that you become severe or joyless. Once you stop burning endless energy on maintaining illusions, you have more space for real joy. Simple pleasures, often overlooked in the chase for spectacle, regain their color. A conversation that is honest instead of clever. A walk where you actually feel the air on your skin. Work that aligns, even roughly, with your values. Rest taken without guilt because you know it serves your capacity to live well. From a Stoic point of view, joy is not found in constant stimulation, but in agreement between your actions and your understanding of what is good. When you live out of that agreement, even partially, your very face begins to carry a different light. This is not the forced grin of someone trying to convince the world they are happy. It is the calm brightness of someone who knows, even amid griefs and uncertainties, that they are at least facing the right direction. Modern eyes may not immediately know how to interpret this. Accustomed to drama, they may look for higher highs, but deeper down, they will register the difference between sugar and nourishment. You may not always feel like a beacon. In fact, you will often feel your own failures more sharply as your awareness grows. You will see how much further you have to go. This humility is part of the path. Stoic writings are full of self-critique, but not the kind that paralyzes. They show people attempting to hold themselves to a standard not of perfection, but of consistent effort. When you fall back into old patterns, when you speak carelessly, react impulsively, betray your own values, your task is not to declare the whole journey pointless. Your task is to stop, look, and resume. You apologize where needed. You adjust where possible. You accept that you are dust and breath, not a machine, and you return to the work. The people around you will see this too. Over time, they will not only see your composure and strength, they will see your willingness to own your missteps. That combination, strength and humility, is rare. It deepens the trust you inspire. Anyone can project confidence when they pretend to be flawless. It takes a different kind of courage to admit, "I was wrong," and then act differently. That courage signals to others that your growth is not cosmetic, it is central. In this way, your life becomes less about appearing attractive and more about becoming someone whose existence adds weight, clarity, and kindness to the spaces you inhabit. You will still be human. You will still feel loneliness, restlessness, frustration, desire. Stoic philosophy does not remove these from you. It offers you tools to meet them without surrender. And as you use those tools, however clumsily at first, you contribute something rare to a world filled with restless eyes and shaky hearts. You show, simply by being the way you are becoming, that it is possible to live with depth in a shallow culture, with calm in a frantic age, with principle amid constant pressure to bend. You may never be widely famous, you may never match the current image of beauty, your name may not travel far, but some people will remember you with an intensity that outlasts more glamorous figures. They will remember the way they felt when you listened to them, the steadiness you radiated when everything was falling apart, the way you refused to speak ill when everyone else was tearing someone down, the way you owned your mistakes without wallowing, the way you stood by your values when it cost you. This is not a fantasy of invincibility. It is an invitation to seriousness. Stoic thinkers suggest that if you live this way, you will not be spared all pain. You will not always be understood. You will not always be rewarded. But you will move through your days with the strange, quiet assurance that, imperfect as you are at least not wasting your life on what does not matter. Others may be drawn to that assurance. They may stand a little closer to you in crowded, confused spaces. They may ask for your thoughts when their own mind is spinning. They may not know the word Stoic. They will just know that near you, something in them steadies, and that, whether they can name it or not, is what real attraction often feels like, not heat that consumes on contact, but gravity that holds you closer to what is true. Heat flares up quickly and dies just as fast. Gravity is slower, quieter, but it does not leave. From a Stoic perspective, much of what the world calls attraction is only heat, sudden, bright, unstable. It dazzles, then collapses. It depends heavily on novelty, on constant stimulation, on outer conditions that cannot be held. Gravity is different. It is not about how loudly you shine. It is about how deeply you pull, and what you pull people toward. If your life is built on noise, you will pull others into noise. If your life is built on avoidance, you will pull others into avoidance. As the Stoic thinkers suggest, you build your life on reason, on courage, on self-control, on genuine care for others. Then your presence becomes a quiet field around you. People stepping into it may not know what has changed. They only feel that something false in them is being asked to loosen its grip. This is the essence of becoming magnetic through self-mastery, not learning techniques to control others, but learning how to control yourself so thoroughly that others feel free to be more honest in your presence. It is easy to hear all of this and feel that it belongs to another kind of person, someone calmer by nature, someone with a gentler past, someone who has not made the messes you have made. From a Stoic point of view, that is exactly the story that keeps you chained. Marcus Aurelius was not writing from a peaceful cabin in the woods. He was writing from within the machinery of power, surrounded by flattery, burdened with decisions that affected countless lives, haunted by illness and loss. Epictetus began life enslaved, his body damaged, his freedom controlled by another. Seneca navigated a court soaked in intrigue, suspicion, and danger. None of them were spared chaos. None of them were born into perfect conditions for serenity. Yet in that imperfection they practiced. That is the word that matters most if you are serious about this path. Practice, self-mastery, in the Stoic sense, is not a state you enter once and never leave. It is the ongoing act of bringing your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors under the leadership of reason, again and again, in situations big and small. You will lose company. Entroll. You will say things you regret. You will fall back into old patterns. The question is not whether this happens. The question is what you do in the next moment, and in the 1,000 small moments that follow. Do you shrug and say, "This is just who I am"? Or do you say, as the Stoics might, "I have erred as a human, but I am also capable, as a human, of choosing differently"? From a Stoic perspective, mastery does not mean eradicating all impulses. It means refusing to be ruled by them. Anger will still appear in your chest, fear will still whisper its warnings, desire will still pull you toward comfort. Self-mastery is the quiet decision not to let those first movements dictate your final action. Imagine two inner forces at war in you. One is the untrained self. It wants immediate relief, immediate pleasure, immediate vindication. It hates discomfort and delay. It does not care about consequences if they are not instant. It does not care about values if they cost too much. The other is the rational self. It sees further. It remembers your commitments. It considers the impact of your choices on your future, on others, on your own respect for yourself. It is willing to suffer a little now to avoid greater suffering later. It is willing to be misunderstood now to stand with integrity. Self-mastery is the art of strengthening this second force so that, over time, it can override the first more often. From a Stoic point of view, every decision you make feeds one of these selves. When you choose to check your phone yet again instead of facing a difficult task, you feed the untrained self. When you lash out in anger instead of pausing to respond thoughtfully, you feed the untrained self. When you lie to avoid discomfort, you feed the untrained self. But when you catch yourself about to escape into distraction and you turn back toward the work, even for a few minutes, you feed the rational self. When you pause before sending a cruel message and choose a different reply, you feed the rational self. When you admit the truth, even though it costs you image or comfort, you feed the rational self. Each choice is small. Together, they are everything. Over months and years, these feeds accumulate. The self you feed more often becomes stronger. Its voice grows clearer. Its reflexes become yours. A person whose untrained self has been indulged relentlessly becomes unstable, reactive, easy to provoke, and easily seduced by appearances. Their presence reflects this. There is static in the air around them. Conversations pivot constantly to their emotions, their dramas, their needs. People may be momentarily fascinated by the intensity, but over time many will back away, exhausted. A person whose rational self has been consistently strengthened becomes steady, not because life is easy, but because they no longer give every impulse the keys to their behavior. Their presence reflects this as well. There is less static, more clarity. You can speak freely around them without feeling that a minor disagreement will trigger an explosion. You can reveal weakness without fearing immediate judgment. From a Stoic perspective, that steadiness is not personality, it is trained character. The training ground is not some secret retreat, it is your ordinary day. You wake up and reach instinctively for stimulation. Before your feet hit the floor, your eyes dive into a glowing screen, absorbing other people's lives, other people's opinions, other people's crises. Your mind, still fragile from sleep, is flooded. The untrained self loves this. It prefers to live outward, never having to face the quiet of its own interior. The rational self, however, sees the cost. From a Stoic point of view, you might experiment with a different pattern. Before letting the world in, you take a few breaths with yourself, however uncomfortable. You remember, even briefly, that you have a limited number of mornings like this. You ask, as Marcus did, what is my duty today? Who do I want to be in the roles I will occupy? This pause is small, but it sets a tone. You are choosing to lead your mind instead of handing it over immediately. Throughout the day, temptations arise to abandon this leadership. You are criticized at work, perhaps unfairly. Rage rushes up. The untrained self demands a reply filled with sarcasm or contempt. From a Stoic standpoint, you notice this inner storm. What response would I respect in myself tomorrow? Is it worth losing my calm for this? Is there a way to defend myself or clarify the truth without letting anger become my master? You might still speak firmly. You might still set a boundary. But you do so from a different center. That center, once again, is built through practice. In friendships, someone fails you. They forget, they cancel, they disappoint. The untrained self wants instant judgment, to write them off as entirely unreliable, to protect you from ever risking disappointment again. The rational self considers, is this a pattern or an exception? What is my own contribution here? What conversation, if any, needs to happen? Self-mastery does not mean tolerating all behavior. It means not letting your pain decide the entire story alone. In your private habits, you reach for what numbs. Food, drink, scrolling, fantasies. None of these are monstrous in themselves. The Stoics were not against pleasure. They warned instead about slavery to pleasure. The question, then, is not whether you ever indulge, but whether you can choose not to. If you find that you cannot, that the idea of an evening without a particular escape feels unbearable, Stoic philosophy would nudge you to look more closely. What are you afraid to feel if you are not constantly numb? What truth about your life, your work, your relationships becomes louder when you are sober, when you are undistracted? Self-mastery often begins with very simple, very mundane acts of restraint, not for the sake of self-punishment, but to prove to yourself that you are still capable of directing your behavior. You might decide, as an experiment, to delay a habitual impulse by a few minutes. When the urge appears to reach for another distraction, you wait, you breathe, you feel the itch without immediately scratching it. This small delay shows you that you are not identical with your cravings. There is a gap in which you can choose. From a Stoic point of view, this gap is sacred. It is the space where your freedom lives. The more you enter this space, the more you realize how much of your life you have been living on autopilot, in reaction to stimuli, expectations, and fears. That realization can be unsettling. It can also be liberating, because if you have been acting from habit, you can build new habits. Self-mastery, then, is not about becoming a rigid, emotionless statue. It is about reclaiming this space of choice repeatedly, so that your actions reflect what you truly value rather than what you momentarily crave. This reclamation transforms how others experience you. People are cautious around those who lack self-mastery, even if they are charming. They know that when push comes to shove, that person will likely be led by their mood, their insecurity, their hunger, their fear. Promises from such a person feel unstable. Affection from them feels conditional. Trusting them requires ignoring many red flags. In contrast, when someone consistently chooses from their rational self, even imperfectly, it creates a different kind of safety. You learn that their yes has weight because it is not given lightly. You learn that their no is not arbitrary, but rooted in thought-out boundaries. You sense that, even when they are upset, they are unlikely to suddenly become cruel, because cruelty would violate the standards they hold themselves to. This safety is deeply attractive, especially in a world where many have known the chaos of being around those who lack inner control. From a Stoic perspective, the most magnetic quality you can develop is not beauty, cleverness, or even intelligence. It is reliability of character. People will forgive you many flaws if they know that your core is steady. They will forgive awkwardness, introversion, lack of conventional success, even visible weakness, if they feel they can count on you to be fundamentally the same person in private that you are in public. If they sense that you are governed by something higher than the winds of your feelings, the path to that reliability, as we have seen, is not mysterious. It is simply hard. It asks you to make choices now that your future self will thank you for, even when your current self wants to avoid effort. From a Stoic standpoint, it is helpful to realize that you are already practicing self-mastery or self-abandonment every day, whether you call it that or not. The question is not if you are on a path, but which path you are on. You occupy two possible lives at once, the life of default and the life of intention. The life of default is what happens when you let habit, fear, and the surrounding culture drag you. You react to everything. You copy what you see. You sacrifice your values for comfort without even noticing. Years pass, then decades, and you wonder why your soul feels thin. The life of intention, which Stoic philosophy points toward, is what happens when you begin to notice your own patterns and interrupt them. You ask why before you say yes. You ask who you are becoming before you decide what to chase. You accept that your time is limited and act accordingly, choosing a few things to do well rather than scattering yourself everywhere. You cannot live both lives fully. Each choice tips the balance. When you catch yourself drifting through a day on default, you have not failed irreversibly. You have been given a chance to wake up. That moment of awareness, painful as it is one of the most precious resources you will ever receive. You can waste it by numbing it away, or you can use it as a turning point. From a Stoic perspective, there is a subtle arrogance in telling yourself it is too late to turn. Behind that thought often hides the belief that you were meant for something easier. The truth is harsher and kinder. You were meant for exactly this, for meeting yourself honestly at whatever hour you finally choose to stop pretending. Epictetus did not get to choose his early conditions, but he chose who to become within them. Seneca did not get to choose the corruption of his environment, but he chose which part of himself he would strengthen in response. Marcus Aurelius did not get to choose the weight of an empire, but he chose whether to be crushed blindly or to meet that weight with thoughtfulness. You may not control the foundations of your life either. Your upbringing, the traumas you carry, the injustices you have faced, the limitations you live within, all of these are part of your given terrain. The Stoics would never deny their power, but they would insist that within that terrain another power remains, your response. This is why, from a Stoic standpoint, the most decisive question is not what happened to you, but what you now decide to train. Will you train bitterness or understanding? Will you train avoidance or courage? Will you train flattery or honesty? Will you train complaint or action? Whatever you train will grow. As you train, your relationship to attraction itself changes. At first you may be drawn mostly to surfaces, as most are, to faces, status, charisma. You may feel a pull toward those who flash the loudest, burn the brightest, promise the quickest escape. Stoic reflection gradually exposes the cost of this pattern. You begin to see how often such attractions leave you emptier, less stable, further from yourself. In time, what draws you shifts. You find yourself more moved by patience than by charm, more impressed by self-restraint than by bravado, more drawn to those who listen than those who dominate. This shift is important because what you admire you tend to imitate. If you admire manipulation, you will practice it. If you admire numbness, you will chase it. If you admire courage, you will lean into your own fear. If you admire integrity, you will suffer for your own values. From a Stoic perspective, consciously choosing your heroes is a form of self-protection. It guards your mind from building its standards out of what is most popular rather than out of what is most worthy. You might look to historical examples, Stoics themselves, not as distant icons, but as flawed humans who still practiced. You might also look around you, to the quiet people in your life whose steadiness outshines louder talents, to the co-worker who never spreads rumors, to the friend who shows up in crises without asking for credit, to the elder who lives with humility despite great achievement. By honoring such people in your own mind, by letting their examples weigh more than the spectacles on your screen, you change the direction of your own growth. Over time, as you walk this road, something paradoxical happens. You care less about being attractive in the eyes of many, and as a result, you often become more attractive in the ways that matter. Because you are no longer trying to be everything for everyone, you become more fully yourself. Because you are no longer willing to betray your soul for shallow approval, the approval you do receive carries a different flavor. It comes from those who can see your efforts, your struggle, your refusal to take the easy path. They may never say the word Stoic, but they will know that your life has a weight that most do not, and they will feel it every time they stand near you. At this stage, the question of magnetism becomes less about others and more about fidelity. Are you faithful to the principles you have chosen, even when no one notices? Do you live in a way that you yourself can stand behind, even if everyone misunderstands? Do you take seriously the briefness of your days, using them for what your reason tells you is truly worthwhile? If the answer is increasingly yes, then from a Stoic perspective, your life is on the right course, whether or not it fits the current images of success. Others will be drawn to you or not drawn to you based on their own readiness, their own wounds, their own hunger. Your work is to become a person whose very existence is an invitation, a suggestion that another way of living is possible. A way not built on frantic seeking, but on quiet, disciplined becoming. And that work begins, always, now. Not tomorrow when you feel more ready. Not later when circumstances are perfect. Now, in the exact conditions you have been given, with the exact fears you carry, with the exact strengths you have discovered and those you have not yet awakened. From a Stoic standpoint, there is no other place to start. So you start here, with what is in front of you and what is inside of you, nothing more, nothing less. You do not wait to become fearless. You do not wait to become perfect. You do not wait until your schedule clears or your pain disappears. You begin with one honest decision, then another, and another, small in the eyes of the world but monumental inside your own mind. Stoic thinkers would tell you that you already possess everything required for this beginning. You have a mind capable of examining itself, a will that can choose one path over another, and a span of time that, while uncertain in length, is enough to live with purpose if you stop treating it as endless. You also have, whether you realize it or not, a deep hunger to respect yourself. You have felt the sting of betraying your own standards. You have known the quiet disappointment of hearing yourself lie, of watching yourself act from cowardice, of seeing yourself cling to comfort when you could have done something harder and more honest. You have also tasted, in smaller moments, the strange satisfaction of doing the right thing even when no one saw, of keeping your word, of walking away from something that felt good but did not fit your values. That contrast is your compass. The path of self-mastery is simply the choice to follow that compass more often, to listen more carefully to the part of you that lights up in the presence of courage and shrinks in the presence of deceit. The 6 habits we have explored are not decorations for a good life. To truly listen, you must set aside yourself for a moment and give another person the gift of your full attention. When you do this, you cut through the loneliness that chokes so many lives. You become a mirror in which others can see themselves clearly, and in that clarity you also begin to see yourself. To cultivate inner peace, you must be willing to stop feeding every anxious thought, every angry impulse, every demand to control what cannot be controlled. You begin to distinguish between what belongs to you. You anchor your efforts where they matter, and let the rest pass as weather. To speak with purpose, you must honor your words as if they were stones you place carefully, rather than confetti you throw in every direction. You tell the truth more often. You say less when saying more would only be noise. You choose language that aligns with your character so that your voice and your life are not at war. To face adversity with courage, you must stand in front of your fear rather than always moving sideways around it. You stop asking only how to avoid pain and start asking what kind of person this pain could shape you into if you meet it with open eyes. You bleed, but you do not surrender your will. To value integrity over approval, you must accept that some people will not celebrate your choices. You must make peace with being misunderstood, even disliked, rather than bending yourself into a pleasing lie. You let your conscience weigh more than the crowd. To focus on growth rather than perfection, you must give up the illusion that one day you will be finished and beyond all error. You embrace your status as a learner for as long as you live. You use your missteps as teachers rather than as reasons to hate yourself. These are not separate tricks. They are one way of being seen from 6 angles. If you begin to live this way even a little, your appearance to others will change, whether your face changes or not. Your energy will become less frantic, less defensive, less hungry. There will be more stillness in you, and that stillness will be felt. People may not use philosophical language. They may speak of virtue, of reason, of discipline. They will say it more simply. You are easy to talk to. I feel calmer with you. I trust you. I feel like I can be myself around you. I do not feel used. From a Stoic point of view, these are not light compliments. They are signs that your inner work is leaking outward, that your private battles have begun to alter the atmosphere you carry. None of this removes the darkness from life. You will lose people you love. You will fail at things that mattered to you. Your body will do things you never wanted it to do. Your mind will still throw up thoughts that humiliate you. You will have days when all your Stoic intentions feel like thin paper in a storm. But if you stay with the practice, if you keep returning to these habits not as rigid commandments but as guiding stars, something grows within you that hardship cannot fully break. You develop a kind of inner weight, not heaviness that drags you down, but density that keeps you from being blown away. You start to see that true attractiveness, the kind that lasts past youth and fashion, is nothing more and nothing less than the visible trace of this inner weight. You have met older people who have it, their faces lined, their bodies slower, yet their presence stronger than ever. They are not clinging to what they used to be, they are rooted in what they have become. They have suffered and not turned entirely bitter. They have aged and not turned entirely vain. They have failed and not turned entirely cowardly. Standing near them, you feel strangely more ready to face your own life. You have also met people who had every external advantage, yet whose presence felt strangely Their beauty could not cover the hollowness. Their status could not disguise the desperation in their eyes. Their charm could not hide the fact that they were terrified of being alone with themselves. Without inner work, time strips away the surface and leaves you exposed. Stoic philosophy does not promise to protect you from this exposure. It offers you something better, a way to become, over time, someone who does not fear being seen, because you have nothing essential to hide. You may still guard your privacy. You may still choose carefully who hears your deepest truths. But you will not live in dread of being found out, because you are not living as a lie. The face you show the world, while never the full story, will not be a complete fabrication. That rarity is part of why it is so magnetic. Consider what happens inside you when you meet someone whose words and actions match over years. They say they value kindness, and you see them act with kindness when there is nothing to gain. They say they value honesty, and you hear them tell the truth when lying would be easier. They say they value courage, and you watch them do hard things quietly. At a certain point, your mind relaxes around them. The suspicion that usually buzzes in the background fades. You do not have to constantly watch for betrayal, because their pattern has trained you to trust. That trust is not blind, it can be broken. But it was earned, slowly, through consistent choices made in front of small temptations. From a Stoic perspective, becoming that kind of person is worth more than any other form of success. You may never dominate a room. You may never be the loudest voice, the first name spoken, the one everyone talks about after, yet your influence will run deeper than many who sparkle and vanish. The people who cross your path will carry some trace of you inside them, a memory not just of what you said, but of how you were. They will remember that you looked at them when they spoke, that you did not rush to fix them or to make their pain about you. that you did not make promises you could not keep, that you stayed kinder than the world demanded without being weak, that you admitted your faults without theatrics and corrected them without fanfare. These are small things, invisible on grand stages, but decisive in real lives. From a Stoic point of view, this is how philosophy should show itself, not in arguments and slogans, but in the way you carry your grocery bag, the way you speak to the person who brings you food, the way you respond when your plans are shattered, the way you talk about people when they are not in the room. Every moment is a chance to rehearse who you say you want to be. You may feel intimidated by this, as if the weight of perfection were being placed on every tiny choice. That is not the Stoic message. Perfection is not the demand. Attention is, you will fail, expect it. You will forget, expect that too. You will hear these words and then, in the rush of daily life, repeat old behaviors as if you had never heard them at all. That is part of being human. What separates the sincere practitioner from the casual admirer is not the absence of relapse, but the willingness to notice and return. You snap at someone you love, despite every resolution to be calmer. Instead of only justifying yourself or drowning in you apologize without twisting blame. You ask what you can do differently next time. You try again. This cycle, played out over years, reshapes you more than any single achievement. It is not glamorous. No crowd will applaud when you admit you were too harsh or too impatient or too afraid, but your soul will take note. Each act of reconciliation, each act of responsibility, each time you choose growth instead of denial, you lay another stone in the foundation of your character. From a Stoic perspective, this foundation is the only lasting security you will ever have. You cannot guarantee health, wealth, approval, or control over events. You can never be sure who will stay or who will leave, what will succeed or what will fail, what news tomorrow will bring. The external world will always be partly beyond you. What you can build, if you are relentless and patient, is a self that can move through these uncertainties without collapsing every time the wind changes. You can become, slowly, the kind of person you yourself would want beside you on your worst day. There is a question worth asking often. If you met someone exactly like you, with your habits, your way of speaking, your way of handling stress, your way of treating others, would you feel more at peace or more on edge near them? Would you trust them with your secrets? Would you lean on them in a crisis? Would you take their advice seriously? Would you relax when they entered the room or brace yourself? From a Stoic point of view, that imagined encounter is not a judgment meant to crush you, but a mirror meant to clarify your work. If the answer is that you would not feel fully safe or calm around someone like you, then you have concrete directions. You know where to focus your training. Not on looking better, not on sounding smarter, but on becoming, inside, the kind of person you long for outside. You do this not to earn love, but to be capable of giving and receiving it without destroying it. As you walk this road, it helps to remember often that your time is not infinite. The Stoics practiced keeping death in mind not as a morbid hobby, but as a way of cutting through delay. They wrote to themselves and to their students that life is already in the process of leaving them, that every day lived unexamined is not stored up somewhere to be reclaimed later. At first this can feel like a threat. Then, if you sit with it, it begins to feel like permission. Permission to stop living for audiences who will not accompany you to your last breath. Permission to stop pretending you do not care about what you clearly care about. Permission to stop postponing your becoming until some mythical future when conditions are perfect. Your life is now, not in the abstract but in the very real sequence of mornings, conversations and choices you occupy. Each time you choose to listen instead of dominate, to calm yourself instead of explode, to speak truth instead of impress, to face pain instead of flee, to keep your values instead of selling them, to grow instead of freeze, you answer the question once again of who you are becoming with the short time you have. Others will notice. They may not say anything. Some will be threatened by your changes. Some will be inspired. Some will miss the old version of you who made them more Some will be drawn to the newer you who makes them more honest. From a Stoic standpoint, your task is not to manage all of these reactions. Your task is to live in such a way that, when you look back at your days from the edge of your final one, you do not have to condemn yourself for having wasted them entirely on trifles. You will still have regrets. Every honest person does. There will be apologies you did not make in time, fears you let rule you too often, loves you failed to protect, times when you knew what was right and still chose wrong. Stoic philosophy does not promise a regret-free death. It offers a way to reduce unnecessary regrets and to meet the ones that remain with understanding, rather than with paralyzing horror. If you spend your life trying to be noticed, you will die having been seen by many and known by almost none, including yourself. If you spend your life trying to be real, you may die having been seen by fewer, but known more deeply, and knowing yourself. That difference is everything. This is the choice in front of you now, to continue chasing the restless heat of surface attraction or to begin cultivating the deep gravity of a disciplined soul. No one can make this choice for you. No voiceover, no philosophy, no teacher can walk into your skin and move your limbs. They can only point, remind, and challenge. Stoic thinkers might ask you, quietly, what are you going to do with what you now know? You can close this and go back to scrolling, back to reflex, back to the same patterns that have left you feeling scattered and unseen. You can tell yourself that you will begin tomorrow, next week, next year, when you feel stronger, when you feel ready, or you can decide that ready is a story you tell yourself to avoid starting, and instead you can begin with one small act of alignment today. You can choose to actually listen in your next conversation. You can pause before your next reaction and ask what is really in your control. You can correct one careless word. You can refuse one small temptation to betray your values. You can treat one mistake as training instead of as a verdict. These acts will not make headlines. They will not earn applause. But they will begin to shift the center of your life from outside to inside, from chaos to clarity. If somewhere in you, this way of living calls to you, do not ignore it. Answer. Let it change what you consume, who you spend time with, what you practice. Let it reorder your priorities. Let it make you strange to some and closer to others. Let it strip away the versions of yourself that were built only to be liked. Decide, with whatever measure of resolve you can muster, that you will not spend the rest of your limited days running from your own potential. Decide that you will train your listening until people feel safe near you. Decide that you will train your calm until storms no longer own you. Decide that you will train your speech until your words add more light than smoke. Decide that you will train your courage until pain becomes, if not welcome, at least workable material. Decide that you will train your integrity until your conscience is no longer a stranger. Decide that you will train your growth until you no longer cling to perfection as an excuse to never begin. That rhythm, not a flawless ascent, is the real shape of a disciplined life. If you want a companion on that road, a place to return to when you forget, a reminder that you are not the only one trying to live with depth in a shallow age, then stay close to voices and spaces that point you back to this path. Let this be one of them. Take what you have heard, test it in your own life, and if it proves itself, come back, listen again, go deeper. Share this way of seeing with those who are ready to hear it, a circle of people who challenge and steady one another. And as you move forward, carry this resolution not as a slogan, but as a practice. I choose growth over comfort. I choose integrity over applause. I choose presence over distraction. I choose to become, daily, the kind of person whose very existence is a calm light in a chaotic world. If you are ready to keep walking this path of self-mastery, discipline, and clear seeing, then let your next actions, not just your feelings, prove it. Continue this journey with us. Keep training your mind, keep refining your character, and let every day be another step toward the quiet strength you were meant to hold. This is your life. This is your time. Do not waste it becoming a copy when you were born capable of becoming a character. Walk with intention. Live with courage. Remember that you will die. And use that knowledge, not to despair, but to sharpen how fiercely and honestly you live. If you are committed to that work, to that kind of inner transformation, stay with the teachings, stay with the questions, and stay with the community that is devoted to this same pursuit of a stronger, clearer soul. Stay with Stoicism Notebook.